Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to Kevin's part two. This is Jeannie Speranza. I just want to remind everybody that after his session, we will have a quick survey with 2 questions. So please don't hang up until after we do the poll. And in the interim, I will now hand it over to Kevin.
All right. It looks like people are still coming into our room, so we'll give it another moment or so. I'll go ahead and pull up my screen now. All right, everybody. Welcome to day 2. So made a quick little slide to make sure we're all on the same page going forward for day 2. Oh, hi, Monica.
Hello, I am still having technical difficulty over here. I'm sorry to interrupt.
It's okay. You want to say anything?
I want to say hello, everyone. Thank you for coming back. You're going to learn some incredible things from Mr. Winchell. Yesterday was an awesome session. Looking forward to learning some really good tools and tricks today. So Kevin, take it away, and then I have a few announcements after you've finished. But everybody, thank you so much. Look forward to working with you.
Sure thing. So thanks a lot, Monica, and thanks, Jean, for putting this together. So a few quick announcements or reminders for you all. I'm glad that you still think this is more fun than anything else you could be doing right now, because you are a weirdo like me who really enjoys politics and this sort of work so much. Or perhaps you aren't doing it because you think it's fun so much as because it's necessary, because everything is the way it is in our world right now, and these systems need to be dismantled and recreated. And so that work won't happen on its own. It takes determined, dedicated people who know how to get things done to make it happen, which is why I love the DWC. Thank you all for doing that. Another reminder, make sure to write down any aha moments you have. Keep some paper handy and a pen, or a Word document or whatever else you want to take notes on. At the end of the training today, we'll share in the chat some of those aha moments, and that really helps me know what's sticking with the training, and so I can make sure when I'm making adjustments later on, I know what to keep and what I may be able to take out and everything. And then lastly, like Monica and Jean mentioned, we'll make sure to finish the training around 4:45, so we've got plenty of time to do our quick survey and have some other announcements from the DWC from Monica and Jean. So Monica, I saw you raised your hand. Do you want to say something else?
That actually was it. That's exactly what I was going to say. So that's why I took my hand down. Okay, so cool. Go ahead, Kevin. Right. Thank you.
And can you all see the slides right now? Just double checking. You see the slide I've got, day 2? Thumbs up. All right, cool. Thanks, everybody. Well, let's get going then. So we were just about finished with our previous section about getting our campaign ready to launch. We talked a lot about building our base and credibility and those sorts of things. Just a couple other quick slides on that topic, and then we're going to jump into, I think, fundraising and budgets and things like that. So it's really helpful for you to have a campaign operations calendar. And your calendar will probably include some different deadlines and goals that relate to messaging, that relate to finance and compliance, especially finance, because you want to make sure you're not missing any campaign finance reporting deadlines. Probably have some outreach goals and benchmarks built in there. As you remember from the training yesterday, we talked a lot about setting goals. We know that setting goals is absolutely essential for having an effective campaign that uses its resources wisely in ways that maximize return on investment. And so your outreach calendar should be one that shows how many doors you need to knock on each day in order to meet your GOTV goals, or how many people to text or postcards to send, stuff like that. You probably have a staffing calendar on this operations calendar too, so that you know who's able to come in and when, and make sure that all your shifts are covered. And then finally, this is one of my favorite calendars to have on there, is a community calendar. And if you're a member of a local club or caucus or DEC, and you're trying to figure out a really great way to support every candidate who's running for office in your area, go ahead and research what events are happening in your community and share that with every Democratic candidate who's in your turf, because that will save them the hours and hours that they'd have to spend otherwise on their own researching the same thing. So let's work together a little bit more, share more information with each other, so that we can keep our candidates' time reserved for knocking on doors, making phone calls, talking to donors, talking to voters, and getting to their win number for their election. They don't need to be researching community events when we could be doing that for them. So here's what an operations calendar may look like for your campaign. And this is a very rough version, but it gives you an idea of what the content may look like. So every week you have a new calendar that you're making: Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. You have messaging goals for each day, fundraising goals for each day, persuasion and get out the vote goals for each day, because remember, persuasion and turnout are not the same conversations. They're two different conversations. So you want to itemize or separate those two outreach conversations or goals from each other. The number of volunteer shifts you have each day, the community events that are happening each day, all of that may show up on your operations calendar. And ideally, you're sharing this with your entire team. You're sharing it with your clubs and caucuses and everyone else, so that everyone can be on the same page. And then last slide in this section, there are a lot of laws you should be aware of. And we've covered, some of the finance related ones, about the need to do reporting and collect occupations and donation amounts and those sorts of things, addresses for your donors. Unfortunately, mostly election laws in Florida change often. It's sometimes not the big ones about contribution limits and stuff, but some other ones do. And so if you want to get more information about different laws, check out these links on here that can get you at least in to the websites that you need to get to in order to find the answers that you need. So that's it about campaign laws and setting up your campaign team and building your base and all that sort of prep work you can do before your campaign begins. This next section, we'll talk about funding your campaign. And there's still some work you can do to build up a fundraising base before you even launch your formal campaign. We're going to talk about that in this section. We'll also talk about best practices for raising funds and some principles and things like that. So let's go ahead and jump into that. So there's a relationship, of course, between your budget and your fundraising plan. And we talked yesterday a lot about how your budget is derived from your campaign strategy, and your campaign strategy is derived from your win number, and your win number is derived from figuring out the expected turnout for your race. And so all of those questions are connected to each other in sequence. And so when you're trying to figure out what your campaign's budget is, you don't necessarily figure out your fundraising plan first. You figure out your budget first. How much is it going to cost me to run the race that is designed to maximize my chances of winning? But how much will it cost to run a race that aligns with my campaign strategy? That's the question you're asking yourself. And so you come up with your budget first. Maybe you have different scenarios, but you have your core budget. And then after that, you figure out what you're able to raise through your fundraising plan. Of course, sometimes there's a feedback loop here, where if you find that you may not be able to fundraise enough money to pay for your entire campaign's budget, then you may need to revise things a little bit. So let's go into an example here of what that feedback loop looks like and what a sample campaign budget may look like. I'm going to stop sharing my screen for just a moment, and I'm going to pull up something else. here is our sample budget and fundraising plan. Okay. You should all be able to see this Excel spreadsheet right now. I'm going to zoom out a little bit. All right, so this spreadsheet, this is also in the Google Drive that we shared yesterday. I'm going to drop the link to the Google Drive once more in the chat. tiny.cc/training, capital T, July 22. So if you still haven't had access to the Google Drive, go ahead and get that link from the chat right now. And in there, you'll be able to find this spreadsheet and the slides and the recordings and other documents that we've been looking at. So this is what your sample budget and fundraising plan may look like. So you start, remember, with your campaign budget, and that's all this information up here at top. Something that's really useful to do is to delineate the different months in your campaign budget. And the reason for that is because you may find that if you were to set a budget for your campaign of, say, $32,000, and that's derived from your campaign strategy, and you set a goal of being able to raise that much money to fund your entire budget. Well, that becomes an issue if you end up raising the money later than you need to spend the money. And so that's an issue of cash flows, we would say. So make sure that you're charting how much you're going to need and which month you're going to need each of those expenses to be paid for. So in this sample campaign budget, and this isn't a realistic budget necessarily, it's just for training purposes to give you a sense of how to create a budget. You want to categorize and then itemize your different expenses that you expect to have. These should be derived from your campaign plan. So in this budget, in the month of January, we're going to need a campaign manager for $200, February for another $200, et cetera. We expect that we'll need to get a website domain registered. That will maybe $25 for that, $50 for data from, to get van access or to purchase the public voter file from the supervisor of elections office. So month of January, we expect to have $275 in expenses. Month of February, $750 in expenses. March, $2,215 in expenses. And you see that the next row tracks it cumulatively. So by the end, we expect our ideal campaign to cost us $32,293. Now we compare that down here to our revenues, to our campaign fundraising plan. And so here, when we go through and we make our first draft of our fundraising plan, we see that we expect to be able to raise $225 in January, and then $600 in February. Well, the issue there is that if we're raising $225 in January, we're already going to be in the hole $50. So we already have a deficit here that we're running. And then by February, that deficit has grown to $200. And over the course of the entire campaign, we expect on the first draft of our fundraising plan to raise $26,660.50, which is $5,632.50 less than our entire campaign budget is projected to be. So if I'm a campaign manager and I'm sitting down with our finance director and our candidate and talking through this race, and we've made our campaign budget and we've made our first draft of our campaign fundraising plan, I'm going to say, all right, our budget is $32,293. Right now, we're only expecting to raise $26,660.50. We've got a deficit here of $5,632.50. How are we going to fill that hole? We've got one option, which is the worst one, which is to decrease our campaign budget by that amount, by $5,632.50. I don't want to use that option. So second option would be for me to ask the candidate to write a check or to donate that much money to the campaign so that we're able to plug that hole basically in our campaign budget. And that would get us back up to the $32,000 mark that we want to have for our budget. However, as you know, especially as Democrats, we don't often have $5,600 laying around that we can put into our own campaigns. And so that's when option 3 becomes available. Option 3 is to look back at our fundraising plan and dig a little deeper and find more people who we think would give us money. And that may be that here on this list right now we've got friend 1, friend 2, colleagues 1, 2, and 3, businesses 1, 2, and 3. Maybe we dig deeper when we find 5 more friends, and we ask them each to give in the month of January, so that we've got a little bit of cushion to get us through these first couple of months when we're expecting a deficit. So that's what that conversation may look like. So the important themes to remember from this campaign budget and fundraising plan are that A, you need to monitor your month-to-month cash flows. B, try to fundraise as early as you possibly can in the cycle so that you're able to have the money that you need in advance rather than having to scramble to get it after the fact and run the risk of not getting enough and then being in the hole with your campaign and having to self-fund more of your campaign. And I think the last thing to keep in mind is that if you don't have enough funds in there, then having that conversation about which friends could also donate, which colleagues could also donate, which organizations could also donate. That's a really helpful conversation to have because it forces you to dig a lot deeper and to expand your network a bit. So we're going to talk more about that and some strategies for accomplishing that in the next slide or two. So let me pop in the chat and see. Okay, it looks like you're getting that figured out with the link. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing this spreadsheet now. We're going to go back to the training, to the slides, that is. Okay, so having reviewed that sample budget, one of the questions that it begs is, how do I find the people who are going to help me raise this money? So the way that we usually approach that is that we make something that we call the list. And continuing our trend of yesterday, I've got some more homework for you today. And your homework today is to make a list of at least 100 people, businesses, organizations who you think would contribute to your campaign or endorse your campaign. This list does not exist if it's not written down somewhere. And so maybe you write it down, maybe you type it up in an Excel spreadsheet or something like that, but it needs to be written somewhere. And then here's the really important part, and this sounds a little crass, but bear with me for a moment, is that you need to assign a dollar amount to each of those people who are on the list. And the reason why is because we talked about this a little bit yesterday. Say that you're in a situation where somebody who's on your list typically gives $500 or so to every candidate who's a Democrat during each election cycle in your community. And we all have those people who tend to give really high dollar donations frequently. There may not be many in one county or another, there may be a lot in another county, but every county tends to have a person or two at least who falls in that category. And so if you approach that sort of person and you go to that person, you say, hey, hope that you'll support my campaign, and you ask them for $20 and they're used to giving $500. You run the risk of them not taking you seriously. You run the risk of them thinking that you might be offending them a little bit even, because part of the reason why they donate may be because it's part of their identity, the status that they have, and that maybe now they might be a little offended that you didn't ask them for the full amount that they're capable of giving, that maybe you think that they aren't capable of giving that anymore. That's how some donors think. And or maybe they just simply don't take you seriously now as a candidate because they think that you didn't do your research. And so I want to make sure that you're doing your research and that you know what an appropriate amount is to ask for any person you're asking for money from. And the best way to do that research is to look at their financial contribution histories. We're going to touch on that in another couple of slides. And so I'll give you all the websites you'll need to go through and find out the giving histories of every single person who lives in your district, and their giving histories to every county, state, and federal candidate and organization who's involved in politics and files reports. So then the next thing you need to do for every person on your list is figure out the best way to make the ask. Some people prefer being in person, some like a phone call, email's fine for others, a text, whatever. They're your friends and contacts, so you probably know best how to reach them. And my challenge for you, this comes from Emily's list. My challenge for you is that, by this point in your campaign, you have your campaign budget, you've started to put together your fundraising plan. I want you to raise 20% of your entire campaign budget by the time you file your very first report. And the reason why is because, say that you have a $100,000 campaign you're running. Maybe it's for state house or something like that, or a really big county council seat. $100,000 budget. If you're able to raise $20,000 of that $100,000 budget by the time you file your first report, that sends a signal to people that you're a strong, viable candidate. And that matters, because if people see you as a strong, viable candidate who's taking this race seriously and who's fundraising really well, if they're not sure about whether to donate to you because they're not sure if you're going to be a waste of their time or money or anything, this will make them more likely to want to donate, because people don't want to give their money to someone they is sure is going to lose. So, money begets money in this sense. And second, your opponents and potential opponents will be looking at these reports too. And if somebody's looking at these reports and they see that you're raising $20,000 in this very first report, and the election's a year away or so, they're going to have second or probably third thoughts about whether they want to get in that race against you. And maybe they'll go for a different seat, or maybe they won't run at all. And the fewer people you have running, generally speaking, means that you're going to have more opportunities to win your election. So raise a lot of money early on so that you're able to show strength and attract more donors and prevent more people from running against you. So let's talk more about what strong fundraising looks like. First, it begins with people who are in the center of this circle here and expands outwards. So talk with people who are in your family, then people who are your friends, then people who are your allies, who may agree with you on different issues or be involved in different organizations with you. Then you've got a circle of people who want access to you. So people who want access aren't necessarily, like, sometimes they have a bad reputation, right? You think about people like Donald Trump, especially, who flouts the fact that he has, all these elected officials in his pocket and stuff like that, especially people like Pam Bondi, gives her $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 for her PAC and stuff like that. Well, it is the case that some access people are like Donald Trump and they expect you to do something for the money. But honestly, though, especially at a local level, 9 times out of 10, the access donors are not people who are expecting something for you from the money that they're giving. They are simply people who want to make sure that when you call, when they call, you're going to answer the phone and be helpful. And it doesn't mean that you need to do something any different than what you would do for anyone else who calls you. You're just providing the same level of service to your constituents that you would give to any other constituent. It just so happens that this constituent wants to give you money in order to make sure that you're elected, so that that person will have someone who will answer the phone when they call. And so that might be a business who has a question about a zoning issue and needs some guidance navigating through City Hall or the State House or whatever, or something like that. And that's the sort of service that you would provide anybody anyway. So there's no ethical dilemma or consternation about accepting access donor funds or anything like that. That's perfectly fine. And in fact, you'll find that many people who are access donors give to both candidates who are running in a race, or all the candidates who are running. And it seems a little strange at first, but when you take into consideration their interest is to make sure that the phone gets answered when they call. And shouldn't that be the level of service that we expect from all of our elected officials anyways? So why can't it be for you too? So that's what I'd recommend. But of course, if you get the Donald Trumps or those sorts of folks who expect a quid pro quo in exchange for their contributions, don't accept those contributions. Just let those go and say, thanks, but no thanks. We'll carry on without you. And then the last group of people you want to contact are the people who don't like your opponent. They're the enemy of your enemy. And there are a lot of people who may not like your opponent, especially if your opponent has already been elected in public office before. They probably made some enemies here and there. And so reach out to those people and ask them for money too, as long as they're not diametrically opposed to the sorts of things that you support. But the key here is that the deeper your relationships are with different potential donors, the more likely they are to donate to you. So as you're making your list of 100 people, you'll be able to populate that pretty quickly from thinking about all the people in these circles. And if finding 100 people is easy for you, make it 200. If 200 is easy for you, make it 400, make it 1,000. There are some candidates who have Rolodexes that are thousands and thousands of people long because they keep meticulous notes on all the meetings that they have and those sorts of things. And that makes them really successful candidates and fundraisers who can run campaigns that are really effective because they can fund everything that is in their ideal campaign strategy. That's great. And we should all try to achieve that level of organization and detail in our fundraising operations too. However, if you find that it is a little difficult to figure out the people who would be on your list, you can get some easy assistance from places like Facebook. You can actually go into Facebook and download your entire contact list, and that'll generate a spreadsheet for you. You can do the same with your phone contact list or your email contact lists through Gmail or whatever else. So Facebook, phones, emails, and stuff like that are great, easy ways to download hundreds or thousands of names almost instantly. Other sources that require a little bit more labor but can still be useful may include yearbooks or directories from your work, your coworkers, your homeowners association, perhaps organization rosters that of groups that you're involved with. In fact, I'll add org rosters to the next version of this training. That's slide 54. Cool. Every time it gets a little better. So those require a bit more work, but they can be a great way to jog your memory too, and find more people who you didn't think about at first glance, but who may actually be really interested in giving contribution to you. And sometimes your memory is jogged by thinking about, oh, you're going through your email contact list at work or your directory at work, and you think, oh, I was at lunch the other day, and I saw that coworker come in, and she was talking about the upcoming elections and how she couldn't stand Moms for Liberty anymore, and she thought that they were radical and trying to impose their religion on everybody and stuff like that. And so so that might be all that you need in order to think that this person may be sympathetic to you as well. It's small stuff like that. So I mentioned a slide ago that we were going to talk about where you could find contribution histories from people. And so that's all on this slide right here. That these are the websites you can go to find federal, state, and county contribution histories for everybody who's either a candidate in your county or your district, or anybody who's a donor in your county or district. So this slide is probably one of my favorite in the entire presentation, because if you are somebody who's having a hard time fundraising, this is golden information for you to have, simply because it's a lot easier to fundraise if you can be pretty much guaranteed that the people you're asking for money will give it to you, right? That makes it a lot easier for you to ask, because using this information, you can go through and create reports to find everybody who's given to every federal, state, or local candidate who's run in the last 1, 2, 3, 4 election cycles. So some examples of what you might do here. Say that you go to the FEC website. You could go and pull up a report for everybody who's in your county, or maybe use a specific zip code or something like that, whatever. Pull up the information for everybody who donated to Joe Biden's campaign in 2020, everybody who donated to Bernie Sanders' campaign in 2020 and 2016, everybody who donated to Hillary in 2016, everybody who donated to the DNC in the last election cycle, everybody who donated to even some groups like Planned Parenthood have their information on state or federal registries too. So you can go in and get a lot of this information. And imagine having a list of everybody in your community who donated to Hillary or Bernie or Biden or whoever else. That's extremely powerful information. Same thing with the state level. You can pull up a list of everybody who donated to Andrew Gillum, or now Nikki Fried or Charlie Crist, or even the state ag races or finance races or stuff like that. Extremely powerful information. And when we did this in Volusia County, when I was treasurer of our DEC, we were able to create a list of every person in the county who had given $500 or more to one or multiple candidates over 3 different election cycles. And we turned that into like a super donor list, basically. And through that, we were able to increase our fundraising cycle over cycle by 24%. And so that translated to like another $8,000, $9,000 or so for our entire DEC, which for us was a really big deal. That meant that we could open up our headquarters for campaign season sooner. It meant that we could order more yard signs and t-shirts in higher quantities and get a better price discount in advance. And then it allows us to do better fundraising later on. It allows us to send more slate cards out to voters through the mail. All those sorts of things are opened up because we had that extra money. So at the county level, you can get this information from county candidates too, or for DECs or whatever else. Some counties have this on their websites, well, actually all counties have it on their websites, the supervisor of elections. So you just need to Google your supervisor of elections office for your county, and it'll pull up there on the finance report section. Locally, you could get this for municipal candidates too. That's all public record as well. Some municipalities have this on their website. Sometimes you need to go in person and ask for it. And usually you'll talk to your city clerk to get that information. One thing I want to mention, though, is that there are some restrictions on how you can use this data. So at the federal level, especially, there's what's called the sale and use restriction that the FEC has. And basically that says that you can't just download Bernie Sanders' entire donor list from the FEC filings and send a mailer to all those people asking them for money for your campaign. That you can't do that. And the reason why they have that restriction in there is because that's not fair. The candidates spend a lot of time developing their donor lists, and why should someone else be able to steal them? So what is fair, though, and what's perfectly fine to do, is to download that list from Bernie Sanders or Hillary Clinton or whoever of all their donors in your district. And you go through that list and you find people who you know or who people in your campaign team know, because what the list does then is just serves as a memory jogger for you. Like, oh, I forgot about this person. Yeah, he'd probably be willing to give. We did this thing together. We were on this club together. We were joined this group together. We volunteered this time together. We went to high school together, whatever. Or you ask people on your campaign team to do the same thing, go through that list and find people who they know. As long as you have some relationship with that potential donor, you can solicit them for funds according to the sale and use restriction. But if you don't have a relationship with them, or nobody on your campaign team has a relationship with them, then that's someone who's off limits from you. The other way that this can be really useful information is when you're trying to do segmentation of voters, not for fundraising purposes, but for figuring out who are your 1s, 2s, 3s, 4s, and 5s. sometimes you may be stuck on a particular person. You're not sure whether that person is a 3 or a 2 or a 4 or what. Do they lean Democratic? Do they lean Republican? You're not sure. The one way you can figure that out, we were talking about using the voter file and all the demographic information to help you parse out who's a 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. Well, you can also use the financial information that's on these websites to figure that out too. Because if someone's listed as a 3 in your voter file, and you find out that that person has donated to lots of Democratic and progressive organizations and candidates, that 3 is now probably a 2, if not a 1, because of all those donations that they've have listed there. Now, if you see that they've donated to Democrats and some Republicans too, look to see what kind of Democrats and Republicans they're giving to. And that can tell you a little bit of story about that voter too. This is really resource intensive. And so that's why it's helpful to have some campaign team members and volunteers who are interested in research and who can go through and help calibrate your voter file using some of this financial information. But something else you could do if you have someone who's really great with using Microsoft Access or other sorts of database software, for example, you get someone like that on your team, they can take the voter file and the campaign finance reports and merge those two together into one massive database. So then they're talking to each other and you can automatically sort all the people who are in your voter file based off their financial history and contribution histories as well. That's extremely powerful. It's a lot more complicated and it takes a good deal of work. But if you have someone who can do that, then they can do that for a district as small as a city commission race or as large as the entire gubernatorial election or US Senate election or something like that for the whole state. Just a matter of having the data and being able to know how to put it together. So really powerful information in this slide. I hope that if you're somebody who has a hard time fundraising or a hard time asking people for money, you'll use the information in this slide to help you find people who give prodigiously to many candidates who are Democrats. Because now if you approach someone like that and they give to every Democrat who's running every cycle and you give them a call, you know they're going to say yes to you if you ask. That takes a lot of the pressure off of you, and that makes it feel like less like you're being an imposition on them, less like you're being yucky, because you know this is something that they always do and they probably love to do it. Otherwise, they wouldn't do it so frequently. So that's information about the different databases you have access to. Now, when you identify a donor, there's a cycle that we go through to make sure that you are taking care of that donor and that you are being a good steward of the funds that they're giving you, and that you're able to re-solicit them for contributions later on as well. So we call this the development cycle or the fundraising cycle. So you begin with a whole pool of prospects, which that's your list of 100 or 200 or 500 or 1,000 or whatever people. You go through a process of qualifying them just to make sure that they're legally able to give you money. Some people, for example, may not be US citizens and they're unable to give funds to campaigns because you have to be a US citizen to do that, for example. And then after you do that qualification process, you have a contact with them. And either they are interested or they're not interested. And if they say absolutely not, you put them in this not interested group and you don't talk to them again. But if they are interested, then you talk with them, you cultivate them. And then you get to a point where you ask them for a contribution. If they say no way at all, then you put them in that red bin and you don't talk to them. But if they give you kind of a maybe, like no, but maybe later, then you talk to them again later and ask again. And you keep doing that until they say yes. And once they say yes, then they go into a stewardship phase where you thank them for their contribution, where you follow up with them and let them know what you're doing with the money that you've collected from them. And that's something like, this last month we were able to knock on 2,000 doors and send out 5,000 text messages and whatever else. That's just your normal campaign summary that you want to send out to let everyone know who's a stakeholder in your campaign how things are going. So you go through that process of stewardship so that they know that you're being a good steward of the funds they've given. And then that allows you to continue this process and ask people again and again and again. Just like in business, you probably heard this saying before in businesses, that it's a lot easier and a lot cheaper to keep a customer than to attract a new one. That's absolutely true in politics as well, which is why stewardship is so important. Because if you're able to keep a donor, it's I think they say 10 times more expensive to get a new donor than to keep an existing one. So whenever you need more money for your campaign, sometimes the first people you should be asking are people who have already given once or twice to your campaign, because they've already said yes once. They've got a good reason to say yes again, especially if you're not asking them for too much money. But then to figure out how much is too much or not enough, you go back to researching their contribution histories. And remember too, one other cool thing I didn't mention about contribution histories is that you may find that some people like to give one big check all at once, like $500 at once or $300 at once. You may find other people want to give smaller amounts more frequently. So maybe they give $5 a month or $20 a month or something like that. And so that can help you figure out what the best amount is to ask and how frequently to give that. You might ask one person to give you $500 up front because that's what they like to do. You might ask another person to give $10 a month or $20 a month because you see that that's what they do for all their campaigns. Maybe they're on a tighter budget. That's fine. It's cash flow for you and helps you meet your campaign's budget. So when we're fundraising, you have to remember that you're going to miss 100% of the shots you don't take. And so what that means is that you need to ask people for money. And the number one reason why campaigns don't raise enough money is because they're not asking enough people for that money. So as a candidate, sometimes it can be difficult to ask for money. It might make you feel a little icky. It might be uncomfortable for you. What I hope that you understand, though, is that there's a lot of data available to help you find people who are really likely to say yes and who even want to say yes. So you shouldn't not ask them because you don't want to impose that on them, because now you're deciding for them. And that's not really fair to them, right? But not only does data help you become more comfortable with it, increase your confidence, but also practicing can do it too. It's really just like learning another language. When you first begin speaking a different language, it can be a little uncomfortable and awkward, and you'll be afraid of messing up or having errors. But the more that you practice it, the more fluent you become with that language. And it can be the same thing for the language of campaign finance. It may be uncomfortable at first to ask people for money, but once you do it often enough, it becomes a little more fluent for you. It's another language that you've adopted. And one of the challenges we have as Democrats is that we're put into a position from the get-go of being at a bit of a disadvantage compared to Republicans, because we know that Republicans tend to have a bit more money than Democrats do. Republican families, conservative families, quote unquote, they tend to have more financial means. And so they're a little more well-versed and fluent in that language of affluence already compared to Democrats. So we do have some challenges that we need to overcome. But if these elections matter enough to us, we'll put in the time to do that. And a really great way to do that if you are uncomfortable is to find someone or a few people for your kitchen cabinet, that informal group of advisors you have, who are those big donors, who can give you some training, some coaching, and maybe let you practice with them a lot. And they can answer some questions for you so that you know a bit more about the psychology of people who donate a lot of money. That can really help you a lot for your campaign. So when you're fundraising, it's good to remember also that you can do in-kind contributions. In-kind contributions are just as valuable as cash, as long as the contributions you're getting are things that you have already on your campaign budget. So in-kind contributions are usually physical items or services that would cost you money otherwise. So yard signs, stakes for your yard signs, pizzas, fundraiser food and wine, shirts, hats, website hosting, all that sort of stuff can be given to your campaign by somebody. All of that has some sort of cash value, and you report that on your campaign finance report as a contribution to your campaign. So a really great thing about in-kind contributions is that they can boost your fundraising numbers kind of artificially, but it can make you seem like an even stronger candidate than you already are. The downside, though, is that these in-kind contributions count toward your contribution limits for your campaign. So if you have a $1,000 contribution limit for your race per donor, and somebody has $1,000, and they also have $1,000 in computers that they could give you, or let's say like printers, would you want $1,000 in printers, or would you rather have $1,000 in cash, or check rather? And I think you'd rather want the $1,000 in cash or check, because then you could buy whatever you need for that and let someone else who doesn't have much cash on hand give you a printer if they've got an extra printer laying around. So be careful about how you use people's in-kind contributions so that you're not taking money off the table that you could spend on something else. So that's helpful to know. When you're making the ask, when you're actually asking people for money, there are a few tips to keep in mind here. And I'm going to go through this a little quickly because it's a lot of text on here, but you can, a lot of this is probably common sense. But first, and most importantly, is to be confident and smile. Don't hedge your ask by saying like, I know that times are tough right now, Regina, but if you have some extra money laying around, you don't mind giving me a contribution, it could really help my campaign to get elected to school board. But I know that you've got some kids going to college now, so if you can't afford it, that's fine. Gas prices are going up or whatever. It's like in this example, I've given Regina 4 or 5 different outs to not give me money. And if I'm asking her for money and I'm priming her to say no, then I'm wasting my time and wasting her time and coming off as probably a weak candidate to Regina. And that's not what we should be doing. We shouldn't be priming our donors to tell us no. We should be priming them to tell us yes, by telling them that we need this and that we need their support to win. So be ready to talk about your campaign plan and show your viability. Be ready to talk with them about how much they give and to negotiate that a little bit. And make sure that you have them give when they agree to give you funds. So if you have them on the phone and they agree to make a contribution, walk them through to your website where they can donate online by getting out their wallet and their credit card or something like that and make a contribution right there on the spot. Or say something like, oh, if you want to contribute with a check right now, just let me know. I'll send someone over to go pick it up from you right now. What's your address? Something like that. So something else that may be helpful too is to ask for the name of another person they know who may give, so that your list of 100 people becomes a list of 200 just by tapping into the networks of the first 100 people. And then finally, remember stewardship. You end the conversation with thank you. And you confirm the details, but you especially end it by saying thank you. And that leaves a lasting impression on donors because they know that you are grateful for the support that they're giving. All right. I'm going to make a quick note here. Don't prime donors to say no. Prime them to say yes. That would be helpful to be more explicit in there about that. I'm going to pop in the chat for a second. All right, I see. So Beverly asks, what are the campaign donation limits in different federal, state, and local races? So the local races are going to be, they're going to really depend on your local laws, and every county and sometimes municipalities are a little different. So generally you find that those are right around $1,000 or so for local races, but you need to check with your local supervisor elections before, in order to confirm that. Federal and state, those contribution limits, it's what, $2,300 per race for federal ones, and state is a little bit less than that. I want to make sure I'm not giving you the wrong information, but all of that information would be available on the federal and state elections campaign finance websites, which is why I link to those websites rather than risking saying the wrong thing here. So if a candidate creates a website, so Stephen asks, what if the candidate creates a website so it is an in-kind contribution and it is also a loan? How is that reported? So if it can't be both an in-kind and a loan, I don't believe. I think you need to choose one or the other. And so a loan is when you're giving yourself money that can be paid back. An in-kind contribution is when you're not giving money at all. So you have to choose one or the other for your campaign finance report, Stephen. All right. So just a couple more slides on this fundraising section, and then we'll be able to get into voter outreach and contact. So when you're making the ask, remember you can ask for contributions from people who gave to your opponent, especially those sorts of access donors who want to hedge their bets and make sure that somebody who will answer the phone when they call is elected to the office. And also don't underestimate the power of telling people that you want to get their name on your report. A lot of people really appreciate being seen as an influencer in their community. And so for a high dollar donor, they may want something like that to show that they're, to reflect their status. But sometimes too, you want to get people's names on your report, not because they're high level donors, but because you just want to show that, you don't care how much they donate, even if it's just $1. You just want to get as many names on your report to show grassroots support, because it may be better for you to show support from lots of people rather than having lots of money. And so an example of that is with this next bullet here about a press release. Imagine that you're in a situation where you're going against a Republican for a county commission seat, and the Republican raises $10,000 in the most recent report, and you only raise $1,000. Well, if that information is being written about in your local newspaper, in the local or politics section or what section, the reporter is probably just going to say what the bottom lines were: 10,000 versus 1,000. So they'll probably say the Republican is dominating this race, and this upstart Democrat is also running, but was only able to raise $1,000. That's probably how it would read by default, because people who are reporters tend to have a lot of deadlines that they're juggling all at once, and they don't have a lot of time always to go into the details of the data to find the bigger story that's happening here. So this is why it's helpful for you to have a press release to tell your version of the story and to turn your weaknesses into strengths and to turn your opponent's strengths into weaknesses. So instead of the reporter running a story about 10,000 for the Republican being raised versus 1,000 that you raised, what if the $10,000 the Republican raised all came from $1,000 maxed out checks from out-of-town developers who want to pave over your paradise? And your $1,000 that you raised came from 100 people who live in your community who each gave $10 because they believed in your race. So you put out a press release that says that, and that flips the narrative instead. And you can be more likely, you can be sure that the press, the reporters who are reporting on your race, are more likely to share your version of the story then, because you've been able to tell them what the bigger story is. And then now, instead of them saying that the Republican is dominating this race, they're going to say, this Republican is trying to buy this race with out-of-town money, and the Democratic candidate is really plugged into the people and is listening to people and is running a campaign that's fueled by the power of people in this community. Very big different way that both of those articles are framed. And the difference comes because you found what the true story, the narrative is. You put that out in a press release and you sent that to the reporters so that they reported favorably for you rather than unfavorably for you. I recommend, as another homework assignment for you, anytime your campaign finance reports are being published through the Supervisor of Elections website or wherever, have a press release ready to go that explains those numbers in a way that's really helpful for your campaign and hopefully absolutely destructive for your opponent's campaign too. So last slide here for the fundraising section is just about the importance of making sure that you're asking for money. I don't like that we have to ask for money in our campaigns. I wish that we were able to simply have informed discussion with our voters and our candidates about a variety of topics, and for voters to select the person who most rationally represents their views and interests and everything. But the fact is, we're in a system that requires funds in order to meet your campaign outreach plan and get more votes than your opponent. So the more asks you make, the more funding you're going to get. And the more funds you get, the more outreach you can do. And the more outreach you do, the more votes you get. So there's a direct relationship between asking people for money and getting more votes. And stated another way, especially in nonprofit sectors, we like to say that without money, there is no mission. And unfortunately, that's true. So if it helps you a little bit to remember that fundraising is not about asking people for money, it's actually about offering people an opportunity to participate and make the change they wish to see in their communities. And don't prime them to say no, and don't not ask them because you think they won't give. That's their decision to make, not yours. And it sounds a little hokey to put it that way, but it's really true. Let them give, and give them the opportunity to give by asking them first. Don't not ask them because you're afraid of doing so, because they may really want to, and you don't have the right really to say no for them. So that's the fundraising section right there. We'll go ahead and pause for just a moment. Let's see. So Stephen, I'm going to check the chat here. If any of you have questions about the fundraising section or budgeting section that we just covered, go ahead and put them in the Q&A section or in the chat. First, I'm going to address Stephen's question. He says that this goes back to the in-kind contribution limits and stuff like that. He says that that's not fair because in-kinds count against our campaign limit. And so, so if you, all right, so Stephen says, if you are able to create a website and then sell the campaign, the website that you create, stuff like that. So let me say it this way, Stephen, the in-kind, so if you are giving yourself an in-kind contribution, you can give yourself unlimited in-kind contributions. There's no limit on in-kinds if you're giving them to yourself, but it's not considered a loan. Loans can really only be cash or checks or some sort of money that's not an object or a service. So don't worry about the in-kind counting against your contribution limit. There's no ceiling there for you doing that for yourself. There is for other people to give you in-kind contributions though. And if you want to, Stephen, if you want to email me that, I can help you find that very direct language in the local, state, or federal guidelines or something like that. Just shoot me an email. And this really goes for anybody. If you have very specific questions like the sort that we're getting into right now about the legalities of different in-kind contributions, email me and I'll help you get that addressed. And so I put my email in the chat here for everybody. Cool. Thanks, Stephen. Make sure to mention to Stephen in your race, whether you're local, county, state, or federal, and all of that. All right. Any other questions from people about fundraising and all of that? All right. Going once, going twice, going to the next section. Cool. So reaching our voters. This is probably my favorite section in the entire training. I probably say that about each of the sections, but I really mean it for this one because this is the part where we get to talk with our voters. We get to find out what's on their minds. We get to get their ideas and hear their concerns and make sure that we are running a campaign that is reflective of everybody's voices in our community. And what's more noble than that, really? So this section will be all about how we actually go about reaching our voters. So this builds off of what we were learning earlier in the strategy section. So let's talk about a few different things here. First off, there are kind of two different models for how our party can conduct outreach, and especially through DECs. The first model, this is more traditional, it's our precinct captain model, where you have a precinct and you have a person who's elected to be responsible for that precinct, or several people who are responsible for it. Each of these people recruit a team maybe, and they conduct their own outreach. They get all their neighbors and people to register and to vote and to know about the issues and all of that. And that model works really well in one sense because it provides clear accountability, because we know who's responsible for every single precinct. It's the precinct captain. And it promotes really effective relationships and more effective outreach in some ways, because you are more likely to have a relationship with your neighbor than you are with somebody who's from outside of your neighborhood, right? So that can make outreach a little more effective. What's challenging about a precinct captain model, though, is that we have inconsistent performance across our precinct captains. Some captains do a great job, some do nothing at all. And we've of course, I'm sure in our district, seen all of the above. So another model that's really emerged that can be a way for us to organize our work is this coalition model, where instead of having one person responsible for every precinct, we instead have a model that divides our district by different prioritized groups of voters, whether those are prioritized based off of race, ethnicity, gender, age, or other demographic variables, or perhaps geographic variables or turnout or whatever. And that allows us to coordinate through the DEC usually with all of our different organizations, our clubs, caucuses, candidates, other civic groups, other volunteer groups, so that everybody converges on one targeted group at a time. So instead of the precinct captain, in the traditional model, knocking on all the doors in their district or their precinct over the course of the entire election cycle, this group instead goes to very specific doors across every precinct and descends on those kind of like a swarm of locusts, and it takes care of the ones that are highest priority first, and then second priority, and then third priority, and fourth priority, et cetera. So the advantage here is that you're more likely to finish lists of high priority targets, and it's pretty easy to schedule too. You might say like, all right, this weekend we are going to knock on the doors of every single person who is Black or Hispanic and registered as Democrat, who's only voted in 2 of the last 3 elections. And then the next weekend we're going to do all of those people who voted only in 1 of the last 3 elections, and then none of the last 3 elections. So you're able to schedule things pretty easily in that way and prioritize your targets. But the challenge is that the outreach is being done mostly by strangers, by people who don't know you because they are not your neighbors, like a precinct captain would be. So there are some trade-offs with both models, but I think that as we move to having elections that are more dependent on turnout rather than persuasion, the coalition model will be really helpful for us. And I'll talk more about the turnout versus persuasion a little bit more later. But I share this because one of the questions I get asked most often is, how should we organize our work? And, how do I make sure that precinct captains are actually doing their jobs and those sorts of things? And so really the answer may be that we don't need to worry about having precinct captains who may be not performing their own, not doing their end of the responsibilities they signed up for. We may not have to worry about having those people at all if we go with a coalition model instead. And the great thing about a coalition model is that we're going to have a lot of volunteers who are able to come on board and help us out, and it gives an easy entry point for a lot of different stakeholders. So I recommend, if you're in a stage where you're trying to think through how to conduct voter outreach for your entire district, then consider that coalition model as an alternative to the precinct captain model for your DEC, your clubs, caucuses, candidates, whatever. So earlier, yesterday we talked about Abraham Lincoln and that letter that he wrote to a friend of his back in 1840 that talked about how you go about organizing a campaign and what the methodology is. And so this slide shows that in more of a graphic form. You start with all the voters in your entire district, which we would call your voter universe. And you look on the left, there's that time arrow. As time goes on, all those voters in your entire universe are sorted into different groups of people. Your ones, your twos, your threes, your fours, and your fives. Your ones are your supporters, your undecideds are twos, threes, and fours, and your fives are the people who support your opponent. So once you identify that somebody is a one, they go down into that get out the vote universe, so that you're going to get them out to vote once you're in the last month of the election or so. The people who are undecided, you need to persuade them and make sure they're going to turn into a one. And so you go through, you have conversations with them, you knock on their doors, you make phone calls, you text them, whatever. And eventually you get to the point where they say, yes, you've persuaded me, I'm going to vote for your candidate. And then they become a one, and then they go into your get out the vote universe, and you're going to get them to turn out when it's time to come vote, for the last month of the election. Anybody who's a five, though, goes into this trash can, and you never talk to them again. Because remember, you have to prioritize how you're spending your resources. And you're going to get a much higher return on investment from talking to a two or a three or a four than you are a five. So that's why we go in that order. And if you find also that let me make sure that, yeah, okay. If you find that you're in a really tough race, and especially like a gerrymandered district or something like that, you may find that it's really difficult for you to get enough votes in order to win your race. You need to figure out ways that you can get more people to be able to vote. And so I want to offer this little chart for you to show that the way that we organized our voters with that previous Wellstone methodology that we talked about before, which is those top boxes that we have here, based on whether they're a strong supporter, undecided, or opposed, and then if they always, sometimes, or never vote. Well, that's not the whole picture, actually, because people who never vote aren't one homogeneous block. There are several different groups of people who never vote. Some of the people who've never voted before haven't voted because they're brand new voters who haven't had a chance to vote in an election before. And so the way that you talk to someone who's 18 or 19 years old, who's never voted before, is different than how you talk with someone who's 50 or 60 years old and never voted. The 18, 19-year-old is still developing habits, and the 50, 60-year-old has habits that are deeply ingrained. And so different messages for both of those groups. So you want to separate those out. And also separate out new voters in your district who are transplants, maybe from another state. You may not have information about how they voted up in Ohio or Pennsylvania or New York or wherever else. And so you don't want to lump them in necessarily with the never votes group, because they may have been politically active, but just didn't exhibit that political activity when they were, while they were here in Florida. And so you can use VAN and the voter file to figure out when people registered here in Florida. And so you'd be able to see if they registered in Florida last year and they're 50 years old, so they registered when they were 49. Either that's because they are from a different state, or it's because they are somebody who's just simply actually never voted before. But you want to talk with them first before you completely discount their ability to turn out for you. And then this third group here of new voters are people who had their rights restored. So you remember 2018 election, what was it, Amendment 2, to restore rights for people who had their rights removed because of felony convictions and things like that. You can be really sure that somebody who now has the ability to vote who did not before, that they are more likely to cherish that right that they've really earned and fought hard to get back. And so someone who's in that box may have a really high propensity of voting that may make them akin to like a sometimes voter or even an always voter. They may need more support to vote because they haven't been able to vote before. So they'll need to know what ID they'll need to produce. They'll need to know how to get to their polls and what to expect when they're there. They may need to have a slate card or things like that. And so it might be helpful for people who are in this box of new voters who had their rights restored. It may be helpful to have them have someone go with them to walk them through that process. Same with an 18 or 19-year-old too. There are a lot of similarities between those two different groups. And then, of course, the group that's at the very bottom of this chart, that's in red, these are people who are not registered at all. And so these are sort of the tragic ones, on my end at least, who feel perhaps that their vote doesn't matter, or that they, what's the point in turning out? All the candidates are the same, or they feel things like that. And so whenever I encounter students who say those sorts of things, because you remember I work at college, if students say that, I let them know that, of course, elected officials aren't going to listen to them. They're not even registered to vote. And what interest does an elected official have of talking with you if you can't even vote for them? Candidates have to get enough votes in order to win. They have a limited amount of time and money to get that done. And they're not going to waste that time on someone who has such a low return on investment. And so once you get registered and you start showing up to elections, they'll actually start listening to you. So I like to put that onus on the people who are not registered and say, if you want to be heard by your elected officials and candidates, then you need to start actually being visible and on their radar. Because if you're not even registered to vote, you don't exist to them. Like literally, they don't know who you are. They don't know that you exist because you don't show up on the voter file. You're not on there at all because you're not registered. People who are not registered to vote don't show up on the voter file. There's no other way to get that information. So consider all these different groups of people who are new voters or not registered at all as opportunities to expand your electorate. So if you're in a district that's really tough and maybe you're down by a couple thousand votes when you do your initial campaign plan, think about how you can have a robust voter registration effort so that you're able to register more people to vote than you need in order to make up the gap in your election and your campaign plan. When the Obama team was looking at running for president in 2007, 2008, they were looking at the state of Florida, and at the time it was not a winnable state. They knew that in order to win Florida, they'd have to have a voter registration effort that was unprecedented in modern political history. And so that's what they did. And they registered more voters in the state of Florida than they ended up winning the race by in that state. And they did that in 2008, and they did it again in 2012. And so that's called expanding the electorate. It's just getting more people to participate. And that we do that through registration. The great thing about voter registration is that if you as a candidate or through a campaign register someone to vote, not only now can they vote for you, but they can vote for every other candidate in that cycle and for every other election cycle for the rest of time, basically. So it's an investment not only in the short term, but also in the long term. And if you remember our talks from yesterday, we need to think a little bit more about the long term for the health of our party. All right, so now we're going to get into a little bit of data about voter outreach. You remember Green and Gerber, we talked about them yesterday. They wrote this book, Get Out the Vote. So Get Out the Vote, you recall they did a lot of experiments to figure out what works and what doesn't, and what the return on investment is for different types of contact. This is what Green and Gerber found when they were conducting their experiments. These numbers hold up okay, now projecting out 15 years or so after this book was written. I think that the numbers are probably a lot more optimistic here than they would actually be today. But what I want you to see is that the relative effectiveness of each of these types of outreach still holds true. So canvassing is a really great way to reach out to people. It's better than phone banking. It's more effective than phone banking. And phone banking is more effective than lit drops, and lit drops are more effective than direct mail, and direct mail is more effective than robocalls. You know, with canvassing, Green and Gerber found that you get 1 additional vote for every 14 people you successfully contact. And they found that with phone banks, you get 1 additional vote for every 38 people you successfully contact, and the list goes on. The key here is that the more personal your contact is, the more likely it is to be successful. So Analyst Institute has done additional research to figure out what the different effectiveness rates are for different types of outreach too. And they've got a lot of that on their website. We'll bring up some of that information in the next few slides. I want to share though too, yard signs tend to increase turnout in a neighborhood by about 1.7%. So you may be in a situation as a campaign manager where people are asking you for yard signs, but yard signs are expensive and they take a lot of time to put out. And so you need to figure out, is the juice worth the squeeze? If I'm trying to get 1.7% higher turnout in this neighborhood, is that worth me having to pay for yard signs to go up and down the neighborhood? Is that worth me spending time to put the yard signs in? Is that worth the time I'm investing in fielding phone calls and emails and texts from people who say, somebody stole my yard sign or somebody cut my yard sign or whatever else? So there are a lot of costs that are baked into something like a yard sign. So it's not always just so simple to compare it to canvassing or phone banking or something else. We always have to consider the time and resources we're putting into something for the output that we're getting to, or the outcomes that we're getting. So that's a little bit about the different voter outreach tactics. One quick thing I want to mention here, you notice that the more personal a contact is, the more effective it is. That doesn't mean that direct mail is not effective though. Direct mail is not effective for persuading somebody, but direct mail can still be very effective for something else, such as enrolling someone in vote by mail. So even though you might only persuade 1 more person for every 200 you successfully contact, you may be able to get 1 additional vote for every 2 or 3 people you contact with direct mail if you're doing a vote by mail enrollment operation. So different methods over different media have different results as well. So every one of these outreach tactics has a place in your campaign. It's just a matter of whether your campaign needs that because of your campaign specific needs. And every campaign has different needs because every campaign has a different plan and different win number and different turnout numbers and everything else. They're all special and different and unique. So Analyst Institute had part of the information that they've gathered helps us understand the effectiveness of different turnout tactics that are available. And these data show the aggregate results of lots of different studies that have been done using each of the different turnout tactics. So they find that the most effective way to get someone to turn out and vote is to have a relational approach to them. And what we mean by that, this is really important, so I want you to pay attention to this. Relational means that they're being talked to by someone in whom they have confidence. So a friend, a coworker, a family member, someone they trust. So that's why it's really important that we have contact whenever possible from people who know each other, because you're more likely to answer the phone, you're more likely to read the text, you're more likely to listen to the voicemail, et cetera. So 2.5% higher turnout on average if you do a relational approach versus not relational. That's a really big difference. And if you think about your ability to scale that up for an entire campaign, imagine how different our world would be if you're able to have 2.5% higher turnout across the board for every candidate because you utilized a relational outreach approach. That's great. That's massive. And what could that look like? Say that you're running a city commission race right now, and you've got 10,000 people in your city. It's a smaller city. You can print out that list, or download that list of 10,000 people in your voter file, and you sit down with your campaign team, and you each go through and you mark which people you know. And then the people on your campaign team use that as their turf for figuring out who they're going to be contacting. And that's a great way to be able to make sure that you're having a relational approach with as many of your voters as possible. And then as you recruit more volunteers and they have more networks and circles, eventually you'll be able to cover half of the city's voters with the people who are on your campaign team, because everybody knows somebody else. Pledge cards, 1.3% effectiveness. Mailers, 1%. Door-to-door, 0.6%. TV, 0.5%. A warm text, which is SMS. Warm simply means friendly, which means like there's something personal in it. So maybe use the person's name, their first name or something, or you use your own name. So it has some warmness, some affinity there. That's what a warm text might be. Phone call, 0.2%, robocalls, 0.0% increase in turnout. And interestingly, paid digital ads, negative 0.1% for turnout. Now, why might that be the case? My hypothesis right now is that paid digital ads are still a very new way of getting people to turn out. That's only been around for a couple of election cycles now, and you compare that to all these other media, they've been around for 100, 200, 300 years even, for going door to door and stuff like that for some of the first campaigns that we had in the country. So because paid digital is so new, their best practices haven't been developed yet. And there are a lot of people who are experimenting and trying different things, and some things are failing miserably and wildly, but some are being really successful. So I think over time, you're going to see paid digital ads increasing in effectiveness, and the worst ones will stop doing the worst practices and they'll adopt best practices. And so you'll start seeing paid digital ads performing at about a 1% rate, or maybe a little bit higher than that, depending on how quickly the long tail shortens up and people adopt best practices. I'm going to finish up this slide and then we'll take some of the questions that we've got here. I see, Linda, you've got your hand raised. So some takeaways here then for when we're trying to do voter outreach. First is that we should only seek votes from strangers after we've exhausted our own friends and family for our campaign team. And then second, digital ads, even though they don't work well for turnout across the board right now, you can still gain donations and volunteers from digital ads, which you can then use to do more relational contacts. So even if digital ads aren't effective at one thing, they can be effective at recruiting more volunteers who can do the things that we know are very effective, like relational outreach. So that's research about turnout right now. Let's go ahead and go to some other questions. Jim mentions in the chat, can't you reach a good deal more people per hour on the phone versus door to door? That's absolutely true, Jim. So that's one of the questions to keep in mind too, is if you have a certain effectiveness rate with one method over another, but you have a higher quantity with one rate over another, maybe that justifies moving your resources elsewhere. What I would say though is that if you're trying to do something that's a little trickier, like persuasion, you'll probably find that your ability to persuade will be severely limited by doing something over the phone. Even if you can call more people, you're going to have such a low success rate that it may be justified to go door to door instead, even though it's a slower method. So you have to figure out what's going to work best for your team and your campaign. What I recommend is, certainly to follow this guidance, but also to test a few things out and to figure out what works for your campaign team. Spend your first couple of canvassing or call sessions and track your data a lot and see which ones seem to be getting the most traction for volunteer, the number of votes you get per hour of volunteer work, and track it votes per hour. That would be the metric we'd use for volunteer effectiveness. Votes per VPK, votes per $1,000 is the metric we use for tracking effectiveness of money we're spending. Votes per hour is volunteer time we're spending. I'll make a note about that too for next time. So so every race will be a little bit different, and if you're relying heavily on persuasion, then you'll probably need to go more canvassing than phones. But if you need to get more turnout, phones are probably a better bet, because you don't need to persuade someone if you're trying to turn them out. You just need to get them the information they need and the support that they need. So phones may be better. It also depends too on population density. If you have the ability to do canvassing in an apartment complex where people are right next to each other, that's a great opportunity to get a lot of votes quickly, because you can go really fast from door to door if you're using that sort of style. But if you're in a more rural area where you've got houses that are a quarter mile apart or something like that, and you have to drive from place to place, that's going to be a factor in that too. And so you may not want to do canvassing in a community that's that rural or not densely populated. So it depends a little bit there too. So Q&A. Oh, Linda asks, please explain the pledge card. Oh, good question, Linda. Thanks for bringing that up. So the pledge card is when a candidate or an organization approaches you, maybe they're tabling or they're canvassing or something, and they say, we want you to sign this card right now stating that you are promising to vote in the upcoming election. And pledge, it seems kind of cheesy, but it actually works really well. 1.3% bump in turnout because of using pledge cards. And a big reason for that is just psychological. When somebody says to somebody that they're going to do something, it makes you more likely to do it. And it makes you, it increases your commitment to doing that thing. It means that you've imagined yourself doing it to some extent. And the more that you're picturing yourself doing something, the more likely you are to actualize that through your behaviors. And so all of that plays a role in making pledge cards effective. Yeah, interesting, huh? All right, so next slide here. So the last slide was talking about turnout. This slide talks about persuasion. So current research on persuasion suggests that, unfortunately, though we probably knew this already from our own conversations with people, is that right now it's really difficult to get people to change their minds, especially for federal level races and especially for presidency. There are organizations that track how likely, what people's propensity for changing their minds is about different levels of candidates for different levels of government. And in the 2020 election, the ability to persuade people was at its lowest rate in the history that this poll was ever conducted. And so what it shows for president is a 0.1% persuasion rate. That means only one person for every 1,000 was actually capable of changing their minds. So what that means for us is that we're looking at the takeaways here. First, presidential elections, but even to some extent elections in general, are decided less by persuasion these days and more by turnout. And so when we are trying to figure out for our own races, for school board or county or whatever, whether to put our resources as a campaign manager into persuading our 2s, 3s, and 4s, the people who are in box C and box D, versus making a decision to put money and resources into people in box B who are strongly supporting us, but only vote sometimes, people who need that turnout conversation, it's going to be, it's in most cases going to be more effective for us to get a higher return on investment from people who need turnout versus those who need persuasion. And so if you're running a race and you have a choice between persuasion or turnout, I recommend you try to get everyone to turn out first. this is why, one of the other things we talked about yesterday was, how can DEC support candidates? How can clubs and caucuses support candidates, and how can everyone support each other? Imagine you're in a district where the DEC has such a great operation and so many volunteers and fundraise and everything that they can make sure that turnout is taken care of for every Democrat. That frees up candidates to be able to do persuasion then, because candidates can do persuasion better than clubs and caucuses can, and certainly better than DECs can. So, but absent a situation where we have that division of labor within our district, if you have to choose between turnout and persuasion, turnout should be your first choice because you'll have a higher return on investment there. So second takeaway, local races offer more persuasion opportunities than federal races do. And you see this on here, Senate and governor, 1.8%, 1.9% persuasion ability. State legislature, 1.2%. Statewide races, 2.5. Sometimes that's just because really not too many people know what the Secretary of Agriculture does, or of what the CFO would do or something like that. Those aren't highly visible races, even though they're statewide. They're still kind of second tier races in many ways. So a lot of people don't even know what those state level cabinet officers are. So that's why you see statewide races are doing 2.5%, even though it's such a high level of government. It's because a lot of people don't have their minds made up and it's not as partisan. Local races, 3.4% though. So that shows that this is a place where you can change a lot of minds, and where endorsements matter, where showing knowledge of issues and competence in managing local government and things like that, all of that matters in being able to change some minds. So takeaway number 3. So this gets to the right-hand side of the screen here about diminishing returns and saturation. If you see on the right side of all the data we have up there, another study that they did about persuasion was to figure out what the increase is in turnout. So actually, it's not a persuasion conversation, it's a turnout one. I'll change that for next time. But something that people at Analyst Institute did was a study to figure out whether it makes more sense for us to use our resources to send 4 mailers out to somebody, or to send 1 mailer and 1 Facebook ad and 1 postcard and 1 phone call. And so is it better for us to go all in on one method of contact, or is it better to spread it out a little bit more? And what they found is that it's better to spread it around, because we get severely diminishing returns and what they call saturation when you inundate people with just one channel of communication. So in studies that they found, people who received no mail for an election turned out at a rate of 36%. People who received 1 mailer turned out at a rate of 37.1. So that's an increase from no mail of 1.1%. If they got 2 mail pieces, it went up 0.8%. And if they got 3 mail pieces, it went up 0.7% more. So you go from a 1.1% increase to then a 0.9% increase to a 0.7% increase. And so you get diminishing returns every time you send another mailer. You're still getting some benefit in return, but eventually you would get to 4 or 5 mailers or so. You're not going to see much of a return on investment after that 3rd, 4th, 5th mailer. So it's better for you to, instead of sending, say, 3 mailers, instead to send 1 mailer and then to do a paid ad and then do a phone call, and diversify your contact methods and use that as part of your campaign plan instead. So that's, I think, really helpful for a lot of our races, because if you're trying to figure out whether to put your money into a mailer or into something else, I recommend you diversify it. And if you think about it, it makes a lot of sense too. Some people throw mailers out immediately upon getting them. And so if you have someone who's doing that sort of thing, you probably want to find a different way to try to reach them. And maybe they'll be more responsive to a social media ad, or they'll be more responsive to a phone call or a text, you don't know. But the more methods you try, the broader population you're able to reach as a result because of their behaviors and all of that. So why are postcards considered not a mailer? Stephen asks in the chat. So it's considered a type of mailer, but it's a little different. Postcards are generally handwritten, or they're smaller and they're punchier. They have some sort of very clear short message that's in them. But yeah, usually they're handwritten or something like that. Whereas a mailer would be something that's a little bit bigger than a postcard. It might even be like full 8.5 by 11, and you might be some irregular size that's a lot bigger than a postcard is. And so that's the difference that they're talking about between a postcard and a mailer. Mailers are bigger than postcards, and postcards tend to be a little more personalized. Hopefully that helps. All right, so doing a little bit of math here. Remember, for our sample campaign that we talked about yesterday, the win number was 5,101 votes. Now imagine that you've taken all the information that we've gathered so far from the research and the evidence and best practices and everything else. You're putting together your campaign plan, and you're trying to figure out how many volunteers you're going to need. If your vote goal is 5,101 votes, and you plan to knock on those doors to contact them, and you need to get one additional vote for every 14 people you contact, because that's what Green and Gerber found in their research, one for every 14. That means that you need to knock on 71,414 voters' doors to reach your goal. And if you're averaging 3 at-homes per hour and 1 2/3 of a voter at each household, so that's 5 voters contacted per hour, that's a total of 14,283 hours of canvassing. And if you're canvassing for 10 months, that's 1,428.3 hours of canvassing per month, or about 14 hours a month for 100 canvassers. That is a lot of work. So this is why training is so important and why using best practices is so important. Imagine that you're faced with numbers like these and you're trying to think through, like, how can I get 100 people to volunteer for my campaign and do 14 hours a month of volunteer work for the campaign? That's brutal. That sounds like a lot of people. So training matters, because the more that you're able to use best practices, the more that you'll be able to work smarter and not harder. So imagine that so up here at the top, your vote goal is 5,101 voters. From the discussions we've already had, that even though that's your vote goal, you can expect that some of those people in that 5,101 voter goal will automatically vote for you pretty much no matter what, because they are strong supporters and they vote in every election. They're super Dems like us. So you can knock those people off of that number already, and that decreases the number of voters you need to contact. It narrows your outreach and persuasion groups and everything else. And then say that you decide to, let's see, you're averaging 3 at-homes per hour. What if you're able to segment your different voters in such a way that you contact them at times when they're more likely to be home? And maybe you do that based off of their age. So yeah, older voters are more likely to be home at one time, and younger voters are more likely to be home at a different time. And maybe it's a different day of the week or something like that. So now, instead of getting 5 voters contacted per hour, you're getting 10 voters contacted per hour. And so that's going to double your effectiveness. So now, instead of needing 14 hours a month for 100 canvassers, now, because you're doubling how many people you can contact per hour, now you only need 14 hours a month for 50 canvassers. And if you're only needing to reach out to, instead of 5,101 people, now you're only needing to reach out to half of that, you need half, again, as few canvassers as you did before. So now you're down to 14 hours a month for 25 canvassers. And now imagine, too, that we're using what we learned from George Lakoff. Remember about political psychology. And instead of using the script that we were using before that did things a typical way, now we're using language that's emotionally resonant. We're using wedge language. We're listening really well. Instead of maybe getting one additional vote for every 14 people we contact now, maybe we're doubling our effectiveness there and doing it for 1 out of 7. So now downstream, we see maybe it's 14 hours a month for 12 canvassers because we're putting all these best practices into play. So every time we do something better than we were doing it before, it makes things easier for us. It makes it more likely for us to achieve our goals. And that's why training and using best practices is so important. So we're doing great on time now. We're getting to some of the last parts of the training that we're going through right now. But what I want you to recognize is that the number of best practices we've covered and tips and everything else, those have a cumulative effect for your campaign. And you can begin putting those into effect right away and see dramatic results, and to make your life a lot easier and a lot more manageable, and to make this race that seems like it's going to be really hard for you to win, maybe now just a little bit more easier, a little competitive for you, instead of something that's hopeless or impossible. So that's the power of using best practices. So when you're talking with voters, a few tips to keep in mind. First is to listen. Second is to know your message and have it memorized to the best of your ability, so that you're not having to stare at your clipboard while you're trying to talk with your voters, so you can keep your eye contact. And then mind your nonverbals too. Smile with them, and even if you're on the phone, because you can hear a smile over the phone, right? Don't waste your time debating people. Just tell them thank you for their time and leave. Use data you have available to make sure that you're connecting with them, and that you know what issues they care about or are likely to care about, so that you can micro-target them really well, like we talked about yesterday. If somebody's not at home and you've spent the time to call them or to canvass them or something like that, I recommend that you leave a message or you leave something on their door, but don't leave it in their mailbox, because that's a felony actually. And you leave a handwritten note too. So bring your pen or your Sharpie with you and write all of that down. Practice things, especially if you have new volunteers on your team and they haven't done this sort of work before, have them practice it a few times with someone who's an experienced volunteer. That will make them more effective when they actually go out and begin canvassing for you or calling for you. And then finally, take good notes and put those notes back into your database so it informs the next time you make a phone call or text message or whatever else. So as you're making your call and canvas scripts, some of the research suggests that you should emphasize that there's going to be high turnout. Say that your friends and your neighbors are voting, because if people know that other people are voting, they're more likely to vote themselves, because that's the popular thing to do. Make sure that people come up with a voting plan so they'll know what to expect. That makes them more likely to vote too. So ask them, will you be voting by mail, voting early, or waiting until election day? What date and time will you vote? How are you getting there? Do you need a ride? Who are you bringing with you? All of those help them visualize it, and then therefore make them more likely to actually follow through on what they visualized. Appeal to their aspirational selves. Say, we're calling voters like you to remind you about next week's election. If you say that someone is a voter, they're more likely to think of themselves as a voter, and therefore more likely to behave like a voter by actually voting. Assume by default that they will vote. Don't ask them, will you be voting? Ask them, how will you be voting this year? By mail, early, or waiting until election day? Notice I say waiting until election day. That's to drive them to vote sooner than election day. It's really important for us to emphasize that. We'll get to that in a moment too. Remind them that you're local and you're human, and get a hard commitment from them. Can we count on your vote on election day? That allows you to update your database really clearly. So as we go through the process of contacting and persuading voters and all of that, near the end of the campaign, during the last probably 6 weeks or so, we enter the get out the vote phase of the campaign, where around this time we stop doing persuasion altogether. And we're just focused on making sure that everybody who's a 1 or maybe even a 2, that we're getting all those people out to vote. So this is now the get out the vote phase of our campaign. No more persuasion, just GOTV. And because we've been keeping track of our voters for the entire campaign, we know who our supporters are, or we should. So this get out the vote phase is what we might call election month. I don't want us to use the phrase election day anymore. That puts a lot of emphasis on the day itself. When if we do that, then it kind of puts all of our eggs in one basket. And if we reinforce the expectation that people vote on election day, what happens if there's bad weather? What happens if they have a personal emergency or a kid gets sick or something like that? Then those are people who don't vote. And so the more that we emphasize election month and make that part of our vocabulary instead of election day, say it with me, in fact, election month, election month. Say that from now on so that we start reinforcing that idea instead, so that people vote by mail more often, so that they'll go vote early more often. And then if they still haven't done either of those, that we get them to turn out on election day itself. But remember, the big reason why we want to emphasize election month is because the more voters who turn out early on, the fewer people we need to call and canvass and mail and use our critical resources on later on. So if you are somebody who does not vote by mail right now, I implore you, really, I just about demand that you begin voting by mail and doing that, 30 days before election day. And the reason why is because if you wait until the last few days before the election to vote, or certainly until election day to vote, other people's campaigns are going to be calling you, they're going to be mailing you, they're going to be knocking on your door, and all of those resources could be going to somebody else who really needs to hear from it, from those campaigns. It doesn't need to be going to you. And so one easy way that all of us can help our candidates is to make sure we're getting our votes turned in as quickly as possible. And that means through voting by mail, 30 days before election day. If you're uncomfortable with some elements of vote by mail, I'd say that you shouldn't be, because it's really safe as long as you just bring your mail directly to the supervisor of elections office and have them check your signature. That's a foolproof way to make sure that your ballot is counted. So go ahead and do that, please, 30 days before election day, so that we don't need to waste our time, our resources contacting you. And please share that with other people as well. And one of the best things that we can do is make sure we're getting slate cards into voters' hands by mail or at the polls at every precinct, every day of in-person voting. So that's during early voting and on election day. One of the best things our DECs can do to support every candidate up and down the ballot is get those slate cards into everyone's hands. And so DECs, if you're on this call, if you're on this training, make a plan to have every precinct covered during early voting and election day for the entire time that those polls are open. It takes a lot of volunteers to staff that, I know. It takes a lot of hours, a lot of shifts. It's expecting a lot of people. But this is one of the single most important things we can do, is make sure that the people who show up for early voting and election day voting get a copy of our slate card. I know that the laws have changed a bit, and it's moved the marker even further back from where it used to be. Over the last few election cycles, it's moved back a little bit. And so figure out for every precinct what that boundary is, and find out if there are any bottleneck points. Maybe it's on the road leading to the precinct. There's that's where was it 100 feet now? It's a 100-foot demarcation line. Maybe that's where you set up your tent then. And as people drive by on the road, you're right there, and you've got your Democratic Party shirt on. You're in a blue tent because it's Florida. It's hot outside and everything. You want to keep some shade. You've got your banners and signs, and you've got slate cards. And as people drive up, you hand everybody who goes by a Democratic Party slate card. Or if they are a Republican, you'll probably be able to tell pretty quickly, so you won't even bother with them. But that's one of the best things we can do to help every candidate. I'm going to pop in the chat for a second and see what we've got in here. Let's see. So Stephen asks, can Dems in nonpartisan elections be on the partisan slate card? Absolutely, Stephen. And we see this often for municipal cases, for county level races that are nonpartisan, they still end up on the partisan slate card. Even I've seen judicial races popping up on partisan slate cards too. Republican Party does that a little bit more than the Democratic Party does. Unfortunately, it's the case that once the Republican Party starts putting people on a slate card, the Democratic Party needs to follow suit, because otherwise the Republicans ensure that all their votes are going to their candidates, and the Democratic Party is not getting their votes to go to a specific candidate. And so our votes get diluted, but the Republicans are all concentrated, and that allows them to win elections more often. So that gets into strategy related to slate cards between the parties and everything. But in any case, to answer your question, yes, nonpartisan can be on the partisan slate card. As long as they're in the state of Florida, they have to be registered as a Democrat, though. That's all. So Edna says, many people think early voting is different from the election day. They think votes will be counted. And yeah, so Edna and others, if people think that, then that means that we need to make sure they realize that it's not actually the case. We need to make sure that we've got relationship with voters and let them know what their rights are. And so one of the things that I love to do, look, this brings up the next slide really well. One of the things we can do with our slate card is not just give them a really great looking slate card like this one from Brevard. So some things that are great about this slate card that it's easy to find each candidate and race and district that are showing up on the ballot. It gives really easy to understand amendment information on the bottom right-hand corner. It gives a great website for getting more information in case people need that. And this is easy to share on social media. This also has great positive photos that humanize our candidates. But to get to your question, Edna, about misinformation that's out there and some myths that some voters have about early voting, for example, or vote by mail or anything like that, we can add the information directly about that to our slate cards. We can say, these are the dates and locations for when you can vote in person. And this is the website you can go to enroll in vote by mail. This is the information you need to bring in with you if you decide to vote in person. You need to bring this sort of ID, with a picture and a signature and all of that. And you can also add in, like, bring this slate card in with you too. Some people, especially at Stetson where I work, I've seen many students, and they get a slate card and then they put it in the trash before they enter the polls. I'm like, what are you doing? They say, well, I can't bring that in. That's a felony, right? I say, no, it's not like a closed book chemistry test where you can't bring in notes with you. You're expected to bring in a voter's guide with you. And so whether that looks like this slate card or a sample ballot or whatever else, you can bring in whatever notes you need. So a lot of people don't know that, especially if they're first-time voters who are a bit intimidated by the system, and especially by the unsurprising rhetoric coming from many Republicans who try to gin up concerns and worries about our elections and saying that you're going to go to jail if you commit voter fraud. The reason why they publicize that stuff so much, even though it is virtually non-existent, is because they want to put fear into people's minds and make sure that people like, our voters especially aren't turning out and voting because they're afraid of going to jail. So it's part of the Republican strategy, unfortunately. So the way that we combat that is by being crystal clear with them about what they can bring with them and what they need to bring with them and where to go and what dates to go and everything else. That's the power that slate cards can have. We make sure that this is in the hands of every single person who votes, and we're going to see more votes for our candidates and more wins for our candidates. Yeah, so Edna says they need to know that they can check their voter status too. That's certainly really important, and one of the things that we can do when we're talking with them and when we're canvassing or doing a phone call or something like that. We should do that as well. And then let's see. So that's a bit about slate cards. Let's transition a little bit and talk about media in general, because this is certainly a part of voter outreach, is working through the media to contact our voters. So when we're talking about media, we're talking about, in this case right here, earned media. Earned media is when you get free publicity for your campaign. So you do that by being where there are already eyeballs. You get that by putting out press releases, writing op-eds, getting endorsements, and having those written about, doing interviews with different groups, creating videos, and doing community service by your campaign, and all those sorts of things. Remember, any time that you get free publicity, that means that you don't need to pay for it. And so it can really be helpful for you to get your name out and to get your message out by utilizing these sorts of avenues. Also, if you're not signed up for this already, you should check out Google Alerts. The way that Google Alerts work is that if you just go to Google right now and type in Google Alerts, what Google Alerts does is that you can put in a keyword like your name, for example, like Kevin Winchell. I have a Google Alert right now set up for Kevin Winchell that anytime the word Kevin Winchell appears anywhere on the internet, Google will alert me. They'll send me an email. It says, hey, here's a website where your name is now appearing. And you can do that for like 20, 30, 100 different keywords or search terms or something. So all of you should do that for your own name, unless your name is like John Brown or something like that, which is really common. But if you're a candidate, put in your name, put in your opponent's name on Google Alerts, put in the city name, the district name, or something like that, so that anytime there's news happening, you'll get alerted right away. Thank you, Google. Also, have templates ready for press releases. Maintain a list of all your local media contacts and their information and what turf they cover. And so you can make sure you have good relationships with everybody in your local media, because they can then help you make sure that they're telling a story in a way that aligns with your framing and your strengths and your narrative that you're trying to push. And then especially focus on the media that are viewed by your target constituencies. So if you're living in a rural area and a lot of people there listen to the radio, you should focus on putting ads and listening to radio then, because that's what your constituents are listening to. But if you're not in a rural area, or you're not, radio is good for like I-4 traffic or interstate traffic too, for people who are commuting to work. But maybe your local voters read a local newspaper a lot, so try to get something written in a paper. So like Anna Escamani here wrote this op-ed that went to what was it, the Orlando Sentinel, I believe, about running on clean renewable energy. And so she knows that a lot of her constituents read the Orlando Sentinel, so she wrote an op-ed for that about an issue that she cares deeply about. So those are some basic media tips. So let's look at social media now too. On social media, it's really helpful it's just about necessary to have a presence on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. So Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram are the more social of media. LinkedIn is just helpful so that people see what your resume is and your credentials and stuff like that, which is helpful for a lot of candidates. But if you're crunched for resources and time and everything, I recommend Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, because through those three services, you're able to cover about 90% of all social media users. If you have extra time, and especially if you are in a district where you're relying on young people to turn out and vote for you, consider adding Snapchat then to your entire social media plan, because Snapchat is something that's used by most young people, especially teenagers. Now TikTok is in there too for people who are in like between 11, 12 years old and like 20 to 24 years old, something like that. So remember who your audience is and make sure you're using a medium that they're actually into. You can do a lot of targeting through social media that's really helpful. You can ask Facebook, for example, to show my ads to people who like Bernie Sanders, or show my ads to people who like Never Trump. Show my ads to people who like Mitt Romney. If you're trying to find, say, if you're in a gerrymandered district and you're trying to get some Republicans to vote for you, Republicans who support, who like the Never Trump Facebook page or who like Mitt Romney or something like that, they're more likely to vote for somebody who comes across as a moderate, maybe. And so you might be able to get some votes for your Democratic candidates by talking to those Republicans, if you've already exhausted all the Democrats, of course. So whatever it is that you want to model your campaign off of, just think through, who would I want to see my ads? It could be not even connected to a person, but it could be like, show my ads to people who like dogs, and you have a dog themed video that you put out, or a meme that you put out, or a Facebook ad or something like that, so that people who love dogs see you petting your dog and something like that. You can also upload your entire voter file to Facebook, and they will find people on your voter file and target them and show the ads to them. That can be extremely powerful. And we were able to do that. I mentioned yesterday the congressional race with endorsements. We showed that we uploaded a list of all the Democratic super voters in Congressional District 6 who lived in DeLand, and we showed people in DeLand who we wanted to target. We showed them that picture of Gus Gibbs, who had endorsed our candidate. And so you can do the same sort of thing, and I'll show you in a moment what that looks like on the back end. But on social media, just remember to make regular posts and align them with your core message. Focus on your conversion rate. So it's great to have viewers, but it's better to have followers. And you can turn your followers into volunteers, and you can turn your volunteers into donors. Following someone online is great, but it's better if they're actually taking action too. So give them lots of opportunities to take action. Post regularly, like, we're going to canvass this neighborhood this weekend, sign up here, or send over a quick donation here so we have enough money to get this ad out in order to chase mail ballots, something like that. Focus on converting people from watching to being active. And then prioritize, encouraging people to share and love, and even better than just liking something. Every 10 likes is the equivalent of 1 love, and every 10 loves is the equivalent of 1 share, usually in Facebook. So if you want people to see the stuff that you're posting, you need to encourage others to like it, or even better, love it, or even better, share it with others, because that's going to boost up the visibility of your posts in Facebook's algorithm. Same thing for Instagram and stuff like that too. So I mentioned a moment ago that you can upload the voter file to VAN, or you can upload the voter file to Facebook. If you're ever wondering whether someone's done that to you and why you're seeing a particular ad on Facebook, check out this example here. So back in the I think this was the 2016 campaign, we had a guy running for Congress, Dr. Stephen Savigny, and I got this ad that popped up on my Facebook page, and it said, Dr. Savigny is running to something, something, something. So if you ever get an ad on Facebook, what I want you to do is click on those 3 dots in the top right-hand corner of the ad, and scroll down, you click on that button that says, why am I seeing this? When you click on that, then you see this other thing that pops up, this text box. And it says, for this particular one reason you're seeing this ad is that Savigny for Congress added you to a list of people they want to reach on Facebook. They were able to reach you because you're on a customer list, or you've provided them with your contact information off of Facebook. Guess where they got that information? It was from the voter file. So if you want to see if someone's targeting you on Facebook because of the voter file, click on those 3 dots, click on why am I seeing this, and see if it says that you're part of a customer list they have. And odds are it's probably from the voter file. You can do the same sort of thing too for your campaign, is to target people using the voter file on Facebook. So we were mentioning a moment ago that you need to make sure you're using social media that are aligned with where your actual voters, your targets are at, where their eyeballs are. This has a lot of information in it, but this comes from Pew Research Center. This shows the different social media outlets that different groups of adults in the United States use on a regular basis. So usually when we think of social media and most adults, we think that Facebook is the most popular one. And it is very popular. You see across that second column there that a lot of people use Facebook. But the most popular is actually YouTube. And so if you haven't thought of YouTube before as a place where you can spend some money for doing targeted ads for your campaign, that's a great place to start. The challenge with YouTube compared to Facebook, though, is that you can't specify which specific people you want on YouTube. You can't like upload the voter file and say target only these people. YouTube can target geographically or demographically, but not to an individual person like Facebook can or like Instagram can. So that's the advantage that Facebook and Instagram would have. But you see that Snapchat over here, people who are 18 to 24 years old, 78% of them were on Snapchat. And this was as of 2 years ago. So it's probably even gone up even more since then. And now TikTok would be part of this too. But if you're trying to reach out to people who are older, say that you have a lot of people in your district who are 65 years old or older, Facebook, you see 41% of people 65 and older have Facebook. That's going to be your best way to contact all of those individuals. But so let's not look at age for a moment. Let's shift over to race or ethnicity. People who are Hispanic, 49% of people who are Hispanic use WhatsApp. And so if you have the ability, if you have a lot of people who are Hispanic in your district and you need to target them, consider using WhatsApp to do that. It's probably not something you thought of before, but it's a great tool that's available in your tool belt. So it's important to note too that media habits are changing. And so a few circles I want to draw your attention to here. The number of people who have used radio in the last few years has started going down, has continued going down even more. Though it's interesting, there are still a lot of people who do use the radio, and this is non-internet radio. 78, 79% of people are still using radio. So that can be a very viable means of reaching folks, especially if you're trying to reach out to people who like may be stuck in I-4 traffic or something like that. If you're talking about a message that is, about, the value of labor and working class people and everything, the people who are stuck in I-4 traffic are the ones who are, working class folks usually. And so they'll probably be interested in the message that you have to share if you're sharing it through a radio station they listen to. But here we see that there's been a really big increase in reading digital newspapers or periodicals. It went from 49.4% in spring 2019 to 61.2% in spring 2020. And now that we're in 2022, that's probably up near 65, 70% or so instead. So big change there in a short amount of time. But then the number of people who are reading actual physical newspapers has dropped from 46.6% to 42% in just 1 year. So media habits are changing, and it's really important that your campaign is aware of that. All right, so that was a lot of information about the voter outreach and outreach strategies and tactics and everything else. I'm going to pause there for a moment to give each of you a chance to take a little bit of a break. I'll drink a little bit of water. If you have any questions about anything that we've covered so far, go ahead and put them in the chat or put them in the Q&A box, and I'll make sure to discuss those. But otherwise, let's take a 5-minute break here and give you a chance to stretch or go use the bathroom or get a snack or something like that. And while you're doing that, I'm gonna have a piece of chocolate because I've earned it. Yeah, any ideas or questions or anything like that, please go ahead and toss them in the chat. I'd love to talk while folks are taking a little break here. Thank you, Stephen. I'm actually going to have another piece. I'll have this one for you, Stephen. This is a little Rolo. I think this might be my favorite little treat. Rolo or Reese's peanut butter cup. It's hard to say. So at Stetson, Stephen's asking in the chat what I do at Stetson. My role is I'm the director of community engagement. And I'm also a part-time faculty member. So as working in our office, our Center for Community Engagement, we connect students and faculty with local nonprofit, civic, and government organizations to create opportunities for internships and research and capstone projects and things like that. And we especially focus them on needs that our community partners have identified, especially around poverty and educational equity, environmental justice, racial justice, and those sorts of topics, and making sure that we're using all the resources our university has to bring to bear to focus on these challenges that we share with our community partners. And so I connect students and faculty with the nonprofits and do a lot of trainings and consultations and a lot of one-on-one meetings to to talk with people and figure out what opportunities might be available. And I'm kind of like I'm like a match.com, basically, just finding out who is interested in what and who else is interested in the same thing and just putting them together and doing that for the entire campus and broader DeLand community. So that's my role, more or less here at Stetson, and have a wonderful team that I work with, and we manage a lot of different programs. I get to also manage all of our political engagement work for the university too. So all of our student voter registration, voter education, voter turnout operations, all that's done through my office and my team, which is a little selfish. I actually wrote that into my job description when I took this job. And so I've been able to do that for the last 10 years, actually, for the university. But beyond that, though, I teach courses related to community engaged learning and community-based research and public policy. Those sorts of topics tend to interest me. I wonder why. Are there like-minded people in Lee County who do that kind of work? I'm sure that there are. What sorts of institutions of higher ed do you have in Lee County? I'm curious. Is there a USF campus there? Florida Gulf Coast University. Oh yeah. Yeah, FGCU has a great community engagement program and a lot of great internship programs. A good friend of mine used to be the director of their community engagement programs. She went over and started doing internships instead, but yeah, they've been very active at Florida Gulf Coast, and I could probably find their website and put that in the chat. But one of the things that I love that we do the most is universities are better than anybody else at generating knowledge usually, and so I try to find opportunities for us to do that in order to answer questions that our community partners have. And so one of the projects that we're working on right now at Stetson is compiling a racial history of the city of DeLand. Because normally when people talk about our city's history, it's usually a very white history, and it misses a lot of the history that's never really discussed through our historical society and groups like those. A lot of this is changing now, fortunately and necessarily, but we're able to get students to, for example, right now I've got a lot of students who are going through census records, and they're figuring out who lived where, when, in the 1900, 1910, 1920, 1930, 40, and 50 censuses, or censi, if you're more of a Latin purist there, and figuring out where people lived at which times, whether they owned their homes, whether they were people of color. And there were a lot of different Black communities around DeLand, on the periphery of DeLand in that time, and getting a sense of where those communities were, if they expanded and contracted over time, and why they did that. So we can tell a more robust history of our entire city and see the effects of public policy locally, statewide, and nationally on the shape and composition of those different communities and neighborhoods over time. And so we're going to put all of that into a presentation about the racial history, especially the Black history of DeLand, and share that with all of our incoming students at Stetson during first year orientation every year. And we'll put it on a website too. We'll share it with our historical societies and all those sorts of things. Yeah, so just one example of the sorts of projects that we're doing. Edna, yeah, so I guess you must have come to the rallies. Yeah, we've had a lot of rallies here in DeLand for DWC. So glad that you're able to check that out. And Jim, the civil rights tourism is up. I have to check that out. You know, we've been to St. Augustine a lot, mostly when I need my fix of Columbia restaurant food. But have to check out the different tours that are happening up there too. Thanks for mentioning that. And then, yeah, Stephen, Stetson's a private school. It's a private 4-year liberal arts university. We have our main campus is in DeLand in Volusia County near Daytona. And then our law school campus is over in Tampa, St. Pete in that area. All right, so let's say just one more moment and we'll get going again, everybody. So we're doing really well on time. That's great to know. That means that we'll have a lot of time at the end for other sorts of discussion and debriefing and everything. Oh, that's interesting, Stephanie. You're able to write a balanced historical account of your hometown titled Around Mulberry. Cool. I'll actually have to check that out. Thank you. I'm making a note of that. Thank you. Okay. Cool. Yeah, I certainly prefer doing the in-person trainings. To your question or your point, Stephen, it's a lot of fun to be able to just chit chat with people in between sections and during breaks and everything else. But it's been great to be able to eliminate some of the barriers to entry by having these online as well. But yeah, the in-person trainings, those are fun because those are on one day and they go for 8 hours. So my voice is usually a little hoarse by the end, but it's so energizing to be there with everybody. And so usually at the end of the full day trainings that I do in person, I go to Dairy Queen afterwards and treat myself to a large Oreo mint blizzard. That's usually my treat there. Maybe I'll do that today too. I don't know. All right, well, let's go ahead and jump back into things, everybody. So we've got 2 sections left in our training. We've got about an hour and 20 minutes to get through them, plenty of time. We'll have a lot of time as well for questions and conversation at the end of the training too. So let's go ahead and jump into the penultimate section, which is about advanced data. So we've talked a lot today and yesterday about the importance of data. We've talked about how important it is for developing your campaign strategy, your campaign budget and fundraising plan, your voter outreach plan, and all those sorts of things. We're going to go into some more detail about data now and where you can get it and everything. So when you think about data, there are a lot of places you can get information on voters and on donors. So a few different columns we have here. We've got a lot of data that's easily accessible, that's voting data, like what types of elections people vote in, if they vote in the primaries, if they vote in the general elections, if they vote in local off-year municipal elections and all that stuff. We know whether people vote early, by mail, or on election day because that's part of the voter file too. We also have contribution information. How much do they donate? How frequently do they donate? What kinds of races do they donate to? All of that. And we have demographic information in the voter file as well. So each of those three types of data have those green check marks on the bottom, because we have those are free, publicly available data. The next group of data, survey responses, it's a little more difficult for us to get because it requires some labor on our part. We need to call people or knock on their doors to ask them, whether they're supporting our candidate or not, to ask them if they support this issue or that issue or the other issue. But all of that information from these surveys that we're doing, because basically canvassing is just surveying people for the most part. All that information is available and really helpful for us, but we need to earn it by investing our time into it. We can also get information, the petitions that are filed to county and state for like constitutional amendments, like we talked about yesterday. So we can get that, and it's more or less, it's free for us to get, just takes time for us to get that. But then consumer behavior and online behavior is going to be expensive for us to purchase, because we actually have to spend money to get this. So, it might seem a little strange to purchase like lists of people who subscribe to different magazines or newspapers, or who like what kind of beer people drink or what kind of cars they drive or things like that. That sort of consumer behavior. But that's actually something that a lot of campaigns purchase, because they find that knowing that information about consumer behavior and then online behavior too, knowing that information about voters helps candidates and campaigns become even more targeted with the sort of work that they're doing. So take, for example, like 10 years ago, one of the lines that was in the Obama campaign's data profile for every single person in the country, it was like what kind of car they drive, if that was a record they had available. And anybody who had a Humvee or a Hummer or something like that, a big gas guzzling vehicle, they typically move those from like a 3 to a 4 or a 4 to a 5, because that's someone who's more likely to vote for a Republican, they felt, based on what they knew about that kind of consumer behavior and how it intersects with political identities. But anybody who had an electric vehicle or a hybrid vehicle would probably be bumped up one number from like a 3 to a 2 or a 2 to a 1, because those tend to be people who are more environmentally conscious, which tend to be liberals. So that information is out there and it is available, and you can purchase it. It's just going to be expensive. The last thing to note here is that there's so much information that's out there that you don't even know campaigns have access to. Your credit card purchases and information can be purchased from Visa or MasterCard or whatever. They don't have any problem with sending companies that information about you. That's actually part of the user agreement that you sign with them when you get the credit card. So all that sort of information ends up being, the downstream effect of that is that some of the like presidential level campaigns, they can have up to 400, 500, 600 data points on every single person in the entire country. And they take all of that and they turn that into a, some sort of algorithm or a scoring system to help them figure out what you're likely to do, what your behaviors are going to be politically. What I'm asking from you and what you should be doing for your campaign is taking all that data you have available and putting it into one database somewhere, whether it's in Van or it's an Excel spreadsheet, or even better, like an Access database or something like that. Just make sure that it's all in there. And when you have that, we talked before about how you can use that to prioritize your voter outreach and segmentation efforts, but you can also use that for prioritizing fundraising efforts. So you remember the old Wellstone grid we had before, the voter segmentation grid? Well, let's call this like a donor segmentation grid. You have people who have donated to identical campaigns, who would be your ones. People who contributed to very different campaigns would be your 5s. And then you've got similar campaigns in the middle, 2s, 3s, and 4s. And then on the left-hand side, people who contribute every cycle, sometimes, or never. And so that can allow you to, once you take all of your donor files and you put them into one database and you sort them and segment them in this way, you can pretty quickly find people who would be in your box one, your capacity builders who donate to identical campaigns every cycle. Those are people who are going to say yes to you if you want to ask them for money. So if you have a hard time as a candidate asking for money, use data to help you find the people who are going to say yes, because that's going to make it's going to make your job a lot easier and a little less nerve-wracking. So this is one way you can use data to improve your fundraising. So you might ask yourselves, how are people getting this data? And you'd be surprised how much we actually give to candidates and campaigns on our own. So these are some examples from emails and social media that I've collected over the years. This is one from Patrick Murphy when he was running for US Senate. I think this was back in the 2014 election cycle, if I remember correctly, something like that. So Patrick sends this message, Kevin, as you know, Patrick is passionate about a lot of big issues. Tell us what issues you care the most about. And so I'm sure all of you get messages like this from political candidates. I'm sure even some of you send out messages like this for candidates or for organizations or anything. But what I want you to do is next time you get one of these emails that allows you to click on a different button in the middle of the email text, I want you to just take your mouse and hover over that text. And on this one from Patrick Murphy, I hovered over the different options, and each of them brought up a different box of text, the gray box that you see there. And each of those gray boxes had a different link in it. And so when I clicked on growing the middle class as my top issue that I was telling Patrick Murphy I care about, when I click on growing the middle class, it sends me to that website. That's that long string of letters and numbers that make no sense. What that is that sends a little signal, a little ping, sends a signal over to Patrick Murphy's database and says, Kevin Winchell opened this email and said that he cares about the middle class more than these other issues. So now, next time Patrick Murphy tries to reach out to me and ask for money or ask me to become a volunteer, guess what issue he's going to lead with? He's going to lead with the issue that I told him I care most about. And why wouldn't he? I've already told him that that's the issue that I care most about. So he would want to micro-target me in that way. So that was how Patrick Murphy did that. He was running against Alan Grayson for US Senate in that same election cycle. This was, I think, 2016, because this was with the presidential election happening. So Grayson was trying to capitalize on the fact that he was a super delegate for the party. And so he says to everybody on his email list, hey, tell me your email address, your first name and your postal code, and who you think I should support for the Democratic nominee for presidency. Should it be Bernie, Hillary, or someone else? And so with that, Alan Grayson is able to find you in his voter file because you're giving him your email address, your name, and your postal code. So that helps him find you. And now he's able to add this information about you, whether you're a Bernie person, a Hillary person, or someone else. And that's extremely valuable information for him, because the way that you talk to a Bernie supporter is very different from how you talk to a Hillary supporter, and certainly different at that time from how you talk to like a Jim Webb or Lincoln Chafee or whoever else supporter who was in that primary. And so that's going to help Alan Grayson with recruiting volunteers and raising money. And even better, he has this text box here of just open text. Tell us why. I know that on his campaign, he didn't do a good job of taking that information and turning that into intelligence that his campaign could act on. They actually left a lot of that just in the spreadsheet, and they didn't use it at all. Ideally, though, they should have taken that information that was offered in that text box on the bottom and coded it in some way to turn that into more information they could work off of. This is in the 2018 campaign cycle from Gwen Graham. So I was, when the 2018 cycle came around, I saw this ad from Gwen Graham on Facebook. You notice it's a sponsored ad, which means that it's a paid ad. And she says, Democrat Gwen Graham is running for governor of Florida. In order for her campaign to succeed, we need to hear from grassroots supporters like you. please complete our legislative priority survey today. And you have a link to this survey. So a few things here before we go to the survey. One, it's a Facebook ad. Two, it's sponsored. And so three, she's leading with the fact that she's a Democrat. If you know Gwen Graham and people who run for governor, they're not going to broadcast what their party is for the most part. They're going to only do that if they're talking with people who they know share their party. So she's probably sponsored this ad, and she's only targeting people who are Democrats who are probably super voters in the state of Florida, because she's trying to secure the gubernatorial nomination for the Democratic Party. So this is probably just a Facebook ad targeting people like me and you who are super voters in the party. If she were putting out this ad as a general election ad, she wouldn't lead with the fact that she's a Democrat, because that would alienate any potential Republican and maybe even some independent voters from voting for her. So anyways, it then sends me to this website where there's this survey I can fill out. I give her my email address, my postal code, so now she can find me in her database. And I'm telling her what issue I care the most about. And there are a lot of different options on here. And the one that I selected was investing in and improving every public school across Florida, which was the first option. So I select that box and only that box. And then on the bottom, it asks, will you chip in $10 to help Gwen on that issue? And I did not, but good thing to try. So what I want you to pay attention to here is the fact that I gave her my information and I said that I care about public schools the most. So now, 1 week later, she wants to send me a sticker, and she wants to collect my name and address so that she can send that sticker to me in order to confirm that I'm the person who filled out that Facebook survey earlier. And guess what issue she's leading with when she talks about her candidacy and why she wants to send me the sticker. She says, Gwen has fought tooth and nail to better the lives of Floridians by improving public schools. The very first issue she's leading with in this email is the same issue I told her I cared about. I bet that if I told her I cared more about drilling, then the second issue she has on here, keeping oil drilling off Florida's beaches, would probably become the first issue instead. And improving public schools would become the second issue on this sentence. So she's just moving around the order of these issues depending on what order I've told her I care about the issues. So now she wants to send me a sticker. I've sent her my information. Yeah, go ahead and send it to me. And what she knows from me requesting a sticker is that I'm really interested in her campaign. I'm engaged, and I may be somebody who is now, instead of being a 3 in her database, is now going to be a 2 or even a 1. She probably thinks that she has an advantage to get my vote compared to the other gubernatorial candidates. And so, anyways, 1 month later after the sticker, she asks me to come and help out with her campaign. She says, I know that the 2018 election is a long way off, but the work starts now. Are you willing to join our team and become a county ambassador or volunteer? And she probably asks that because she notices that I haven't given her any money yet. And so she's asking, maybe there's another way you can show your commitment, Kevin. Instead of by giving me money, you can become a volunteer. And so you can do it this way. So that's what her team emailed over to me, Amber Holland, who must be her outreach director or something like that. And then as I continue to get emails from Gwen Graham's campaign, they really focus on education more than any other issue, because that's the issue I told her about. So the first line in this email says, Kevin, after I sent my last email about Florida's broken education system, a mom reached out to me to share her story. You don't say, Gwen. Yeah. So your campaign can do this too. And it seems a little corny when you deconstruct it this way. But for most people who get these emails, what they're getting now is something that is tailored to them, to their interests. It's something that is resonant with them. And it's going to make them more likely to sign up as a volunteer or as a donor. And maybe it only increases the likelihood of them donating or volunteering by like 2 or 3% or so. That seems like a small number. But if she's sending this message out to 100,000 people around the state, and this gives her a 2% bump for 100,000 people, a 2% bump means that she's now getting 2,000 people to contribute who wouldn't contribute otherwise. And that's pretty significant. And the reason why they send out emails like this is because they work, is because they're effective, is because they actually raise money for doing this. And if I was her fundraising director and I knew that every time she sent out an email, I'd have enough money to hire another field director for another county in the state, I'd figure out how we could send out 10 emails a day rather than just 1 or 2, because I'd want to make sure that we're staffing up everywhere that we need to for the entire campaign. So no wonder they send these out, it's because they actually work. Monica, you unmuted yourself. Did you want to say something? No.
I am so sorry. No, I was actually just talking to Maureen. I will mute myself again. Sorry about that.
It's okay. So notice in here too that Gwen also asks me to sign a petition. She's got this link to a petition on there. Petitions don't, especially coming from candidates, they usually don't do anything at all. Petitions are really just a way for them to, find out that you're even more deeply interested in an issue than they thought you were, which then they reflect on their voter file database. And then B, if you filled out a petition, you know that the last question they ask is normally, now send this to 5 other people who you know also care about this. Because what Gwen Graham's campaign is doing here is when she asks me to fill out the petition and then send it to 5 of my friends, she knows that I'm going to be selecting friends who probably care about this issue as well, and who are probably Democrats. And so she's now adding their email addresses and names to her contact list, even though they may not have been on there before. So she's using my contact list to build her own network. And that's really smart. And that's something that a lot of candidates do. And that's something that you could do too if you chose to with your campaign. So here's an example from Andrew Gillum in 2020. I'm sorry, in the 2018 cycle. So I get this Facebook ad from Andrew Gillum, which is talking about the Trump administration's changes with EPA and drilling and everything. And he says, take our poll now. I support offshore drilling, or I support the environment. Like, of course, people who are getting this ad are overwhelmingly going to click on I support the environment, right? There aren't going to be any surprises there. And so what this tells us is that Andrew Gillum's campaign was using this as a way to figure out who of their people on Facebook are true supporters of the environment and everything else, and then getting their email addresses and name and postal code so that we can actually, they can find us, connect us between Facebook and their voter file, and check to see if we're engaged and things like that. And so it's also sending a kind of a subconscious signal that he's a candidate who cares deeply about this particular issue as well. And you can tell that they didn't put a whole lot of additional thought into this, though, because when you get to the form after you click on the link for the survey, the text for the survey, do you support offshore drilling, yes or no? The bubble options don't even line up with the yes or no options that are available on there. So like they didn't put a lot of thought into this. They just wanted to get as many, grab as many email addresses and names and information like that as they could. And then once you add your name to this, it asks you for a contribution too. So they're hoping that this ad would pay for itself and then some. So I share all of that with you about social media and data collection and use and everything so that you understand what that data ecosystem looks like. And really, in the end, what we're talking about, what a modern campaign is that it's a database of every possible voter, what they care about, how likely they will vote for you, how often they vote, what method they use to vote, how often they contribute, to whom they contribute, how much they contribute, and how they should be contacted by you. That allows you to create a custom message for every single voter, maximizing your probability of getting them to vote for you or make a contribution to your campaign. And that's what a modern campaign looks like. It's data-driven, it's integrated, where all these systems and processes and apps and contact media are talking to each other and reinforcing each other. that all have these feedback loops, basically. So you have your database in the middle here, that in the cloud, more or less. Every phone call you make is influenced by what's in that database. And then the results of your phone call get dumped back into the database, which then influence the next time you knock on someone's door. The results from that get dumped back in, which influence the next email that you send, or the next TV ad you put out, or the next Facebook ad you do, or the next mailer that you send out, or postcard, or something else. All these feedback loops that continually improve data and outreach. And those of you who have worked with your local DECs or clubs or caucuses, and you've helped make phone calls or knock on doors, and you've filled out when you get a walk list or something like that, and you put data in there and you write it in with your pencil or your pen on the paper, and you give that data back over to the DEC for them to input into VAN, you got to make sure that they're putting that in, because otherwise they're leaving a lot of information that you've taken a lot of time to cultivate for them. They're leaving that to wither and die and not to be used again in the future. And sometimes, that's why voters get frustrated with us, is because they say something like, someone just came to me, asked me about this last week, and I told them the same damn thing that I'm telling you right now. And they feel like they're not being heard then. And so it's really important that when we collect data, that we put it back in. So if you're in a leadership position with your club or caucus or DEC or campaign, I implore you to make sure you have someone on your team who's in charge of making sure the data gets put back into VAN or put back into your spreadsheet or your voter file, in order to make sure that we're learning from our previous conversations, and to make sure that our voices, our voters' voices are being heard, and they're not being frustrated by our repeated efforts of doing the same thing over and over again. All right, so that's the advanced data section. I'm going to pull up the chat for a moment, see some questions that we have here. Stephen asks, do Democrats need to worry about which vendors we use, such as MailChimp for our mail list programs, or the cloud for our singular database? To my knowledge, Stephen, I'm not aware of any of our national vendors like those being politicized. I know a lot of groups, for example, that use MailChimp or who use Emma or Constant Contact or different groups like those. I'm not aware of any of those groups, donating to Republicans or those sorts of things, or being insecure with our data. So MailChimp should be fine, for example, if you want to do that. And as far as your singular database in the cloud, VAN is the best option to go with if you do have the funds and support to be able to get VAN. If you can't get VAN for some reason, then keeping your information in Dropbox or Google Drive or something else is fine. Just make sure that you password protect everything, because you have a lot of really sensitive information in there and you don't want it to fall into the wrong hands. So have clear password protections, and use, I'm holding up my phone here, use multi-factor authentication to make sure that if people are trying to get into something, that they have to, respond to a text or a number or something like that, that can add another layer of security and prevent your information from walking away. So good question there. Any other questions about advanced data or those sorts of things? Any others? All right, well, let's get going to our final section of the training, and we'll have plenty of time at the end for just to remember, we're going to share our aha moments. We're going to do a quick survey that the DWC has, and we'll have some other time for questions and discussion after that is all done. So COVID is happening, and it's unfortunately still happening. And maybe even though COVID has ebbed and flowed over time, and it's I don't know if it's ebbing or flowing right now, probably ebbing, I guess. Something else may take its place. We see that monkeypox is coming around. So we're in a stage right now in campaigning where we're much more aware and vigilant about safety and hygiene and the contact that we have with other people and everything else. So let's talk for a moment about what campaigning looks like during times of pandemics and COVID and public health emergencies and everything else. The first tip, and really the best tip I have, is that if you're going to do 3 things during COVID to increase your voter turnout rates and everything else, the first thing you should do is encourage vote by mail. The second thing you should do is encourage vote by mail. And the third thing you should do is encourage vote by mail. And that's not just during COVID, that's during normal campaigns too, because if people are voting at their earliest possible opportunity, that frees up your resources to contact people who really need to hear from you later on, who are doing in-person voting, either early voting or on election day. And vote by mail is important because it's so convenient and it's easy, and people who enroll in vote by mail are 30 to 50% more likely to actually vote than those who are not enrolled in vote by mail. And some of that is a self-selection bias, but a lot of that is just because structurally it's a lot easier for people who are sporadic voters to now become regular, consistent voters. So vote by mail, vote by mail, vote by mail. Great during COVID, great not during COVID, great at any time. Please do that as often as you can. And if you enroll in someone in vote by mail through your club, your caucus, your DEC, your campaign, that's going to help every other candidate up and down the ballot for this election cycle, and hopefully for the near future as well. Texting is a very fashionable way to reach out to people these days too. It's still kind of new, but it's not as new as it was like 6 years ago, but it's still a little more novel and used more and more compared to traditional phone calls. If you want to use texting in a really successful way with a lot of people, a lot of voters, there are a lot of different platforms that allow you to do person-to-person texting, that allow you to do mass texting and personalize them a little bit so the message is warm. You remember that we were talking about warm messaging earlier, where you like personalize it with your name or the person's name or something like that. You can get numbers, phone numbers from Van and the Supervisor of Elections office, but make sure you vet those first before you have any volunteers text people, because there are some restrictions on whether you can actually text people who have given their numbers to Van and everything. Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. And then focus less on policies when you're texting and more on getting feedback from people about what levels of support they have for you and giving them direct calls to action as well. So texting is not a good way to talk about the details of a healthcare plan, but it is a great way to say, hey, Bernie's supporting this plan. Is this something that you agree with? Or, hey, Monica Reedus is running for Congress, and we want to get all of her supporters to chip in $5 right now to support the campaign. Can you do that? Text this number or text us a reply saying 5, and we'll debit that from your ActBlue account or something like that. Texting is really great for those sorts of very specific, very clear, very short responses that give you information or donors or volunteers. You should be investing in your online presence during this time as well. That's going to help you both during COVID and once COVID and everything else is over with as well. That means getting more people on your email list, more followers on social media and everything else. And then go where your target audience is. We talked about that a little bit already, but if you're trying to reach out to people who are younger, check out apps like Spotify, Pandora, YouTube, Snapchat, TikTok, Instagram, some podcasts, Facebook, some Twitter. They can be in all those places. If you're targeting people who are older, like 65 or older, Facebook, traditional TV, radio, some YouTube, some podcasts, things like that. And then if you're trying to contact people who are actually in the media, like reporters and everyone else, use Twitter and Facebook to do that. So some questions in the chat. All right. Oh, cool. Okay, good discussion about vote by mail. All right, so when you're doing voter outreach, remember that we can go back to doing canvassing now. It's important that you still give voters distance between you and the voter, and that if you're going to be indoors, you should probably wear masks, especially if it's a crowded space, and have lots of sanitizer available. But some people think that you can't do canvassing anymore. That's absolutely not true. You still can. You must in some cases, especially if you really have to try to persuade people to come and turn out. Second is that you can do virtual face-to-face options as well. A lot of different online town halls and those sorts of things. A lot of candidates and campaigns are saying, like, every Sunday night at 7 o'clock, come join us on Facebook Live, and we'll have a town hall. We'll answer questions, we'll share ideas, and those sorts of things. So you can set up those for precincts. You can set them up for voters or volunteers or whatever you want to do. And then I recommend that you have some sort of registration process, if possible, for people in order to enter that, so that you're able to capture their email addresses and contact information and put that into your database. Also, it's really great, be like Beto O'Rourke and stream just about everything you're doing on your campaign. Stream your activities on Facebook Live, so that voters feel engaged, so they feel like they're part of you, and they get to see your personality come out too. So you're not just this, literally a two-dimensional, stiff person who is personified on a mailer that they're handing out or that they're getting in the mail, but that you're a blood and flesh living human being who has a sense of humor and has clear values that come out when they see you informally chatting with volunteers or voters or something like that. So streaming can be really useful. And if you want to have a volunteer who just does that for the campaign, that's great. It's a really great way to engage people. And then finally, as we were talking about before, relational outreach is some of the best outreach we can do. 2.5% more effective than just having standard outreach. And so leverage the relationships that your volunteers and your networks have with other people. Right. And when you're on Zoom, when you're doing any of these sorts of online meetings or things like that, be mindful of your presence and your visuals. First is make sure that you're lighting yourself from the front and not the back. If you're lighting yourself from the back, then your face is going to be in a shadow and people won't be able to see your face, but they'll see the stuff that's behind you really well. So have a lamp that gently diffuses the light. And really what's really good is to have a soft lamp on both sides of your monitor if you can, or just like one of those glow orb lamps that's above your monitor or something like that. That's kind of what I'm using right now, actually. Your background should have some personality, but it shouldn't distract from your message. So you see all the people on here. There's one person on this slide who's got a flip the first sign that relates to their campaign. So good to have stuff like that so that people always know your message and everything else. And a lot of people are visual learners instead of auditory learners. So you want to give them some visuals to chew on a bit. And then last, make sure that your camera is in front of you and not above you and not below you, so that you make sure that the angle is really flattering for you and that you're not like looking at people's necks or chests or things like that, and also not at the top of their head and those sorts of things. So have it directly in front of you like this. All right, so we're getting close to the end of the training now. Here I'm going to share a few different slides that have a lot of different resources for you that may be helpful for your campaign. So the first is that the Florida Democratic Party over the last few years, started by Lisa Peth and continued now by some other staff, they started what's called the MVP, the Municipal Victory Program. And so their goals through MVP are to build a local bench and capacity, to flip some districts and get local policy change. And so they want to make that happen by helping you generate campaign plans, offering training opportunities, discounted van and texting, getting you donor lists, and all those sorts of things. So if you're running for a local election race, if you're running for a city or county or school board race or something like that, go to this website here, floridadems.org/blueprint, and learn more and sign up on there. A lot of great resources they can connect with you with, and it doesn't hurt to get more resources for your campaign. The next, this is really great if you're looking for outside organizations, whether they're state or national groups, who might be able to give you some extra support and resources for your campaign. This could be coaching or volunteers or fundraising or communications assistance. So let's go down this list really quickly. And this is just a list of the most prominent ones, but there are many others still too. Ruth's List supports pro-choice Democratic women candidates in Florida. Emily's List supports pro-choice Democratic women's candidates across the country. Emerge America supports Democratic women candidates. She Should Run supports women candidates. Collective PAC supports Black candidates. Latino Victory supports progressive Latino candidates. Victory Fund supports LGBTQ candidates. Run for Something supports young progressive candidates. New Leaders Council supports young progressive candidates. ARENA supports progressives in general. And New Politics Leadership Academy supports national service alumni. So military, Peace Corps, AmeriCorps, programs like those. If you are a candidate and your identity aligns with any of these organizations, you should be reaching out to them to ask them how they can support you. And that could wind up getting you more volunteers. It could get you an endorsement. It could get you free publicity. It could even get you a donation or contribution from them. A lot of these organizations have the ability to give money to candidates, and that can be very powerful. So Stephen asks about the Hispanic vote. The Latino Victory is the most, I guess, well-established group who's doing that. But there are some other groups like Voto Latino that do some of that work, and there are probably some others as well. So check all of those out. And then one other resource that may be helpful for you is called Campaign Greenhouse. And I used to work with them as one of their campaign coaches. They have some free resources on a Facebook page that they manage. They give a lot of campaign tips and stuff there. They've got a website that has some information too. They offer some low-cost consulting and group coaching and resource libraries and those sorts of things. So if you want to learn more about Campaign Greenhouse, check out campaigngreenhouse.com. All right, so as we wind down this training now, a few things I want to leave you with that are important to me, and I think that that it should be important to you as well, is that a lot of times you might find that there are a lot of things broken in our system, and especially in our party. That's absolutely the case, and I find new things all the time. What I want you to realize is that sometimes it's not going to get fixed unless we're the ones who fix it ourselves. We can't necessarily wait on people to come in and fix it. I remember when I first got involved with the party, I knocked on my first doors in 2004 for some woman named Emily who was running for office in South Florida. I was a sophomore at Stetson at the time, and I didn't really know the difference between a Democrat or Republican even though I was a poli-sci major. That's what happens when you come from a first-gen family that doesn't really talk about politics much. Anyways, so the person whose door I was knocking on for, I said it was Emily. It turned out to be Emily's List. And I enjoyed my experience so much that I volunteered more in the 2006 cycle. I volunteered a lot more in 2008 with the Obama campaign, and then decided to become secretary of my local Democratic club in Northwest Volusia County after that. Then got involved with the DEC. And as I got more involved, I thought that the Democratic Party would have all these resources available to me to help me know how to do my job well, to help me know how to be secretary, or how to run our office, or how to run our headquarters or our campaign, or how to be president of our club, or those sorts of things. And every time I assumed that those resources would be there, or that training or mentorship would be there, it wasn't. I assumed that the adults had this stuff figured out already, and they didn't. And so I found myself in a position as a young Democrat having to learn a lot. and figure things out through my own experiences, through trial and error, through conversations with people who knew more than I did, who were really active in Volusia County where I was coming up. I read a lot of books, you know, the Green and Gerber books, the Lakoff books, the Wellstone books, you know, read basically anything I could get my hands on, and went to you know, events and stuff like that. And over time, developed enough knowledge to be able to share that with other people. And I, you know, got to a point where there were so many people who needed that knowledge that I started to lead trainings in Volusia and then around the state. And, you know, that's kind of how I accidentally got to the position where I am now, where I'm kind of the lead trainer for everybody around the entire state of Florida for the Democratic Party. And it shouldn't be the case. That should have been figured out decades ago. There should be a robust training program already in place. But the fact is that no one else was doing it. And sometimes when no one else is doing it and you've got the idea and the means to make it happen, you got to step up and do it. And so if you see that that's the case, if you see that there's something that needs to happen, especially in our party right now, we need you to step up and do that. And if you're not sure how to make it happen, but you see that it is a need, email me, talk with Monica, you know, the DWC president, talk with any of us and let us know what it is that you see that's broken and needs to be fixed. And we'll help point you in the right direction. We'll connect you with more people who might have other resources that you could work with in order to make those sorts of changes you want to see in our community. So don't wait for others. Reach out to people like us and we'll be able to connect you and help you figure things out. We're also most successful when we coordinate with each other. And so we shared a lot of opportunities through the training the last 2 days about how we can coordinate with each other, how DECs can focus on getting out the vote for all the registered Democrats so that candidates can focus on persuasion of independents and NPAs. We talked about how we can share data, we can share donor lists, we can share volunteer lists, we can share event lists and all of that stuff so that we don't have to have every group researching their own stuff and coming to the same conclusion, but doubling, tripling, quadrupling the amount of work we're putting into it. You know, we need to share all that information with each other and coordinate with each other. And the more that we can do that, and the more that we can each identify what we're best at doing and contribute that to our overall team, the further and faster we're going to go with retaking Florida and making it a blue state again. So we have a, you remember I wanted you to write down an aha moment for the day, something that you've learned that's really sitting with you, that's kind of an epiphany or something like that. I'd like you to take that aha moment right now and put that in the chat. And while you're doing that, while you're getting your aha moment for the entire training so far, if you have a few aha moments, put those all in the chat, that's fine. While you're putting those in the chat, there are a few things that are in there I'm going to address quickly. And then I'm going to turn it back over to Monica and Jean to finish us off. Let's see. Beverly, I like yours a lot. And I'm glad that you're not normal.
I do too.
Stephen, the thing you like most about the training is that it's Stetson or learning more about Stetson, I suppose. So, you know, this training has nothing to do with Stetson, by the way. I should be absolutely explicit about that because Stetson's a nonpartisan organization. But yeah, it's a great university. If you're ever in the area, I'd love to meet up and hang out with you. We can get lunch at really great place, a lot of places downtown to eat here in DeLand. So just let me know. So Michelle, the level of collaboration we need to move forward together, absolutely essential. Let's see. thanks for sharing that. And then Jay says how we can ask Facebook to target a specific group of people. How we can use that strategically. Good. Yeah, and then Krista, so to emphasize your point a little bit more, Krista says it's a good starting point to make your list of 100 people who might contribute to the campaign before you even begin your campaign. And yeah, and so while it's the case that you can't ask people for money before you begin your campaign, you can't accept any money, you can still call all those people or contact them and say, hey, I'm considering running. When I do, can I count on you for $50, for $100, for $500? So you can have that first conversation with them before you even press that button to declare your candidacy, so that when you do decide to run, when you do file the final paperwork and open your account, you've already lined up your first 100 donors. That's going to make things a lot easier for you when it comes time to running your campaign and starting off strong. So Stephen says election month was an aha moment. Excellent. I hope that you strike election day from your vocabulary forever. All of my friends, please do so. And Linda says that their aha moment was at a pro-choice rally this morning, and people remembering me and remembering I was there, and they want to help and need to get involved with the campaign. That's great that you have that you're finding people already who want to support the campaign and giving them a way to get plugged in. And then Constance says voting early allows resources to go where they need the most. All right, well, as you all keep putting those in the chat, we've got one question that's popped up in the Q&A. Andy says, I'm good at identifying strengths in people who might make good candidates. What are you good at? And I wonder, Andy, if that's a question that you like to ask people, or if it's something that you're asking me. But I think if you're asking that for people, it's really good to do so, because it helps people. Oftentimes people like to talk about themselves, and they like to identify what they're strongest at and what sometimes they're weakest at as well. And giving them a chance to do that gives them a little more agency and authorship over their experience with a campaign. As far as me, though, I don't profess to be the best researcher or campaign strategist or those sorts of things. I'm just really good at learning and sharing what I learned with other people. And so that's my superpower here. You don't need to be really smart or anything to do this sort of work. You just need to be resourceful and to know that people have figured out the answers to a lot of this stuff already. And you just need to know where to find those answers. So that's what like half of this training is all about, is just plugging you in with that national ecosystem of knowledge and research that's already been happening. All right, well, keep the aha moments coming in. Monica, go ahead and take things over from here.
So actually, I'm going to ask Jeannie. We're going to take a quick poll. As these events that we're putting on, we're trying to make sure that we're doing the very best that we can, or if there's something that you want to hear more of, or if there's a Kevin Winchell 2.0 you want to have, or something along those lines. We just want your feedback on this meeting today. So Jeannie, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Monica. I'm launching a poll right now. It's just 2 quick questions. So if you can, please, I'll give you all about a minute or two just to go through and answer them. This will help us, for more content in the future. I'll give it another minute or two.
I have to say that we've been working with Kevin since our first rally in DeLand, and I believe that was in 2017. And we have always had, I've probably attended at least 6 or 7 of these, and the information is always different. And I see how he compiles information based on even the responses and questions that have been asked today. So next time it's going to be more informative, and this is kind of how he morphs his work, which is always so phenomenal. So I want to thank you, Kevin, for another phenomenal event this weekend. I know from reading the chats that folks feel empowered. We have everybody's email address. We will be sure and get an email out to you with the link to Kevin's you're using Google Drive, I believe. And then for folks that are running for office, we're also going to provide you with a link to ask and apply for endorsement from the DWCF. If you are in a primary, I would say do it anyway. We can't endorse pre-primary, but if you are the winner of the contest, then we will get that endorsement right out. We'll get that check right out. And we know that it takes money to run campaigns. Jeannie, I want to thank you as always for your technology expertise and keeping us on track, and another great job. Dr. McKenna, Maureen McKenna, is the chair of the training committee, and she was texting me when I went off mute, and she's very ill and wasn't able to attend today, and she at least wanted to join us to close out and say thank you. So I'm giving you her thanks on my behalf, her thanks by me, and then also we have some trainings that are coming up. We have trainings on the legislature this year, what we can expect. We have a training coming up on how to select judges and the difference in the different contests, the different elections for the judges. And both of those are going to be in, one's going to be in September and one is going to be in October, but that information there's more to come there. And we're working hard to make sure that we give you everything you need. DWCF members, if you have ideas, please email them to us. We are addressing everything, and actually there's going to be a big powwow next month where they get together, and we're going to try and plot out what 2023 is going to look like. So thank you for joining us. Thank you, Kevin, for another amazing event. You are top of the line, and I think everybody knows it after experiencing this. And everybody have a great evening. Thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, thanks so much, Monica. Thanks, Jean, for putting this together. And thank you all for the kind words and for all the work that you're doing to bring change to the communities that need it more than anyone else. So if you want to get in touch with me, email me, democracystrategies@gmail.com or kwinchell@gmail. You can follow me on Facebook, Democracy Strategies, for more training opportunities and things like that. But yeah, keep in touch and let me know how I can help you, because we all need to support each other at times like these and make sure that we're turning Florida blue again. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye,
So long,
friends.
everybody.